including my relentless pursuit of women for a few months the next winter, my indecision before marrying Julie, and my frustration upon learning of Julie's betrayal. For a group of migrant laborers of questionable legal status, their insights into their token gringo's mind were as clear and strong as their work ethics. Shannon also shared her experiences. After a semester, she switched from petroleum engineering to a 5-year professional certification program in environmental sciences. She required only an internship to graduate in August. As part of her college experience, she pledged CHIO, participated in Rush, attended all the mandatory mixers, and got to know many nice tech students along with a few individuals of questionable character. She had been a cheerleader throughout her undergraduate years and was honored as all-campus beauty during the 3 years she allowed her sorority to nominate her. University had been the experience she sought. She learned a lot about people and pretenders, and she was on track to graduate summa cum laude if her internship supervisor, an individual with the unique name of River, graded her favorably. 2 weeks into her internship, she felt optimistic about her chances. Perhaps the best outcome of the barbecue was that I gained a roommate, a senior intern for Pitaya Ventures LLC. When we stumbled inside to clean up and get some rest, I discovered that she had claimed the closet in the spare bedroom as well as part of mine. Seeing the colorful athletic shoes and high heels hanging on racks I had never noticed before was intriguing, as were the stylish dresses in the other closet. "Pretty confident, weren't you?" I remarked with a raised eyebrow. "Of course I know you can't resist me," she replied playfully, "especially in the shower." With that, she got changed quickly and made her way into the shower. Although the space wasn't meant for two, I managed to join her, and we closed the door behind us. We shared enough room to wash and rinse each other, taking turns to ensure we were both clean. I attempted to tease her in a more playful manner, but she was having none of it. No, she insisted. "We can have fun later, but not in here." Despite her protest, I couldn't help but be a little mischievous, causing her to shiver with surprise. The playful banter continued as we enjoyed our time together. She told me it was just 2 fingers, but it felt like a lot more, like something big. She laughed at my movement, cleaned me up a bit, and teased me, all while having wet hair. She was truly the most beautiful person, looking so good in such a messy situation. I dried her off, then she dried me, and I playfully chased her to the bed. She jumped into the air and landed with her head at one end and her feet near the headboard. It was the kind of invitation that made her wishes clear. The connection we had was amazing. I enjoyed every moment, feeling happiness all around us. We both were focused on each other, not paying attention to anything else. After a while, I turned to her, lifted her up, and set her down gently. "Now let's get cozy and enjoy this together." You can't imagine how wonderful it felt to be so close, sharing that special connection. It was as if everything else faded away and all we wanted was to be together. I'm not sure how we ended up so tired after all the excitement, but we did. When I woke up early in the morning, she wasn't in bed anymore. I felt a bit sad, but I loved listening to her humming a happy song. She welcomed the new day and even insisted on making my lunch if I made hers. There's no way to describe how cute Shannon looked in her clothes. I knew we needed to have a conversation soon. I had fallen right back into my feelings for her, and I needed to make sure this wasn't just a short affair. I said seriously, "Shannon, we need to talk." She replied cheerfully, "Okay, you're my supervisor, so we'll drive together today. We'll have plenty of time to chat, but we should hurry so we're not late for our appointments. Let's get ready. Then we can talk." She was right. We were 5 hours away from Santa Fe, and even our lunch plans would be in trouble if we didn't hit the road soon. She chose the tan suit instead of the black pinstripe, along with brown boots and a stylish hat. I got dressed as she suggested, went to the dressing area she had used, and received her approval. "Load all your things and put my bag in the back seat. I'll be ready in 5. She wore a nice beige dress with a red belt that ended at her knees, and her shoes had 2-inch heels. It was casual business attire, just like my light suit, and we looked good together. The friendly comments from the workers heading to the fields confirmed my thoughts as I escorted her to my truck. She made everything look great. We were halfway to New Mexico before I remembered we needed to talk, but I wasn't sure how to start the conversation. Finally, I said, "Shannon, There's a strange similarity between your last internship and this one. You show up unexpectedly, we chat and have drinks, and then things heat up. I need to know if this is just a quick fling again or if it means something more. I can't bear watching you leave again." She laughed, shook her head, and replied, "Well, let's see what has changed between then and now. I was 18 when I came before, dealing with college and its temptations. Now I'm 23 and just a few months away from graduating. Do you see the difference? Last time I visited, did I bring a lot of my clothes and take over your space? Was my last internship officially part of my college program like this one? Are you noticing any clues yet? Let's try another thought. Did you ever think that my coming to see you just days after your divorce might not be a coincidence? You've been getting updates about me through my brother, and I've kept tabs on you too. Surprised? And here's my truth. I fell for you hard during those 3 days. I hoped every day that you would be free after I finished school. I was heartbroken when I heard about your engagement, and even more so when you got married. Then Brad got suspicious about your fiancé after running a check and discovered the name Jack Higgins. He wanted to wait for the full report before telling you, but he suspected she was being unfaithful. I know you, and I knew that wouldn't sit well with you, which made me hopeful. When things went wrong at the reunion, I felt bad for you, but good for myself. I made my plans and was ready when the final decision arrived. I may have had help from your friends at the camp, and they might have shared some information about you and how you feel. River and Katrina may have added even more details, and River might have spoken to the dean to make sure my internship was with Pitaya Ventures. I can't say for sure if any of that is true because I made some promises and I keep my promises. But the main point, Theodore Monroe, is that I love you and I want to sleep next to you every night for a long time. Hopefully as Mrs. Theodore Monroe Carr. Any questions? Not really. I think you explained things well. I'll tell you more later, but we need to focus on the agenda and our responses to the questions from the Assistant Land Commissioner and the State Director of Oil, Gas, and Minerals. She turned, grabbed her shoulder bag, took out her laptop, and shared a response from River along with some instructions. His responses were not required, but were helpful. I joked that she had earned the right to provide the answers, and I would add my own touch. She started to argue, but then sighed and agreed, going over River's responses and her notes. Since I was paying, they chose a fancy restaurant and reserved a private room. I noticed Greg's reaction to my associate. He has always liked women. Amy surprised me more. She is smart and talented, and she dislikes any suggestion that she used her looks to get ahead, which she didn't. She's the most capable official I've worked with in OGM, but she also wears stylish dresses that show off her legs to make her point. The dress she wore hinted that she wanted to focus on me. I thought Amy would be annoyed with Shannon, but instead, she saw a kindred spirit, and they began a friendship that would help both of them in the future. Greg seemed at a loss for words. Perhaps he was too distracted to speak. He is Amy's boss on paper, but as the director of OGM, she had the final say unless it was a political meeting, in which case Greg would take charge. We enjoyed a drink, had a nice meal, and then Amy opened her laptop. As you know, we recently received $47 billion to clean up abandoned wells. Pitaya Ventures has been working on cleanup projects in New Mexico for several years and is the top choice for many landowners in eastern New Mexico. You are the last group we have invited to give us advice before we prepare the bid details. We have a few questions for you. First, should we separate the bids into capping and plugging on one side and cleanup operations on the other? What do you think? Shannon looked at me and I nodded. She started our answer based on River's input, and it was a strong response. At Pitaya Ventures, with our extensive experience in cleanup operations alongside oil and drilling companies, we believe the turnkey method will best serve the state, the landowners, and the environment. No, we do not do the capping and plugging ourselves, but we work with several companies that do, and we have had success with them on many projects. When work is divided among different companies and issues come up, it's easy to blame each other. But if one company is in charge, the state knows who to hold accountable. We think that company will be more careful in planning and executing the work at each location, so we highly recommend you choose turnkey bids. Amy glanced at Shannon and then looked at me. Theo, do you have anything to add? No, I believe she covered everything. How about the numbers? Are there enough companies like yours to take on a project this large? I answered this question. A project this big needs to be split into smaller parts. Set priorities. Offer the higher priority items for bid first and see what you get. If possible, consider how close the companies are to each site, because moving teams great distances can be expensive and time-consuming. We expect the state to have an idea of who might bid, since we all need to pass an exam and get approval to work here. So, if you're asking whether any single company or group can take on the whole project at once, the answer is no. We do not have enough trained workers to manage it all at the same time, and neither does anyone else. We can manage it in stages, but not everything all at once, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Shannon, do you have anything to add? She said no, and Amy moved on to technical details that probably only River and I understood, but Shannon played along well. Greg seemed to have the afternoon off. He continued enjoying his drinks and admiring the lovely ladies nearby. I found myself doing the same while they chatted. The difference was that he was leaning over the table, sipping his drink and focusing on their smiles. From where I sat, a little away from the table and at an angle to Shannon, I had a clear view of Amy's legs under the table and Shannon's on my side. As the afternoon went on, they seemed to relax more. Their dresses went up, and more skin became visible. It felt like they were having a little fun with it. Then I noticed their smirks, and I realized I was caught staring. I'm sorry, but honestly, it's not every day I see two beautiful pairs of legs. I guess my curiosity got the better of me. Since neither of you seem upset, I assume it's okay. That got Greg's attention. He quickly moved his chair to get a better look, but the moment he spoke up, the fun came to an end. He looked a bit let down, but Amy gave me a wink, and when he looked up, she smiled cheekily. Then she exchanged winks with Shannon, and they giggled like they were in high school. It was after 4 when we returned to the truck, so I suggested we find a place for the night and explore Santa Fe. Shannon said she was sorry, but only had the clothes she was wearing. What? No extra bag? That's a must-have when you're on the road. She looked a bit shy, so I suggested we stop at a store I knew to grab a few things. She liked that idea, and an hour later I did too. Unlike Julie, Shannon took her time, looked around, and picked out a few items to try on. She quickly chose the best ones and moved on. Of course, it helped that she looked great in everything from pants to dresses and even swimwear. Within 5 minutes of using River's credit card, she had everything neatly folded in her new bag. While she was changing, I booked a room in my favorite historic hotel in Old Town. After that, we swung by a drugstore for some toiletries before heading to our hotel. A lesson I learned: never take her to a pool filled with baseball teams in town for a tournament. She attracted a lot of attention, saying it was payback for my fascination with Amy's legs. I asked her to wear jeans for our walk to a New Mexican cafe that had been around for over 100 years. It was probably better than a dress or shorts, but she still caught the eye of a few people right in front of me. It didn't seem to bother her, but it did make me uneasy, until I got used to it. While we waited for a table surrounded by fit young men from the baseball teams, our names were called. Shannon excused us, and we were escorted to our table. I was walking behind Shannon and the waitress when they turned right, and I suddenly saw Jack Higgins and my ex, Julie. Julie seemed surprised, while Higgins looked shocked. Taking the chance, I called Shannon back and brought her to their table. Shannon Barnes, this is my ex-wife, Julie Bean, and this is her partner, Jack Higgins. Or have you two tied the knot now that I'm not in the picture? Not that it's any of your business, but we're engaged, Higgins replied. Shannon glanced at Higgins and then turned to Julie. She shook her hand warmly and said, "Thank you both so much. I thought I had lost him for good, but you helped him find his way back, and now he is mine forever. Really, thank you." She shook Higgins' hand too and then suggested we go to our table. Once we sat down, she asked, "Is she really a doctor? Because anyone who would choose him over you must not be thinking straight." Then she placed her hand behind my neck, pulled me close, and shared a kiss that turned a lot of heads in the room. The waitress smiled as she watched until Shannon let go and leaned back in her chair. The waitress, who looked to be around 18-20, grinned at Shannon and said, "I'm sorry for intruding, but once I saw you, I couldn't look away. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, and I mean that sincerely." "Thanks, but you're really cute yourself. Do you live here or go to school?" "I grew up here, and I'm taking some classes at SFCC to get the basics done affordably. If I can save enough from my 2 jobs, I hope to go to Texas Tech next year." I want to study environmental sciences because they have some great programs. My dad has a tough job at a small company that works on old wells, but he's away most of the time and doesn't earn much for how hard he works. Now that you've heard my story, sorry for the ramble, can I take your drink orders? She came back with our drinks, took our food orders, and hurried off to place them. After chatting with us, she looked a bit shy as she walked away. I noticed the determination in her step, and I felt sorry for her situation. You'd be into her if I wasn't here, right? She's attractive. Not at all. If you weren't in my life, sure, but I'd help her find a better job than this. She's had a tough upbringing, facing challenges from society and peers. But what she lacks in confidence, she makes up for in drive. She'd be a great worker until she left for Lubbock. Shannon flashed me her bright smile and playfully touched my leg under the table. I returned the favor until she started to look uneasy and said, "You need to stop that right now, or I'm going to make a scene." "Go ahead, Sally," I replied, as I continued my actions discreetly. She took my hand and pulled it away, sitting up straight and closing her legs. The couple at the table next to us seemed to enjoy the moment, smiling knowingly. I removed my hand and casually wiped my mouth, taking a moment to enjoy the flavors. The lady nearby blushed and crossed her legs, while the man chuckled softly but kept his attention focused. Mama was going to have an interesting night. Our cheerful waitress returned with our food. After serving us, Shannon asked, "When do you finish work tonight?" "Not until 9. I don't have to close, but I'll be busy until then. We're across the street at the old Santa Fe Inn. Why don't you come visit us? We might have an interesting offer for you." She looked at Shannon, then at me, and turned red. Leaning in, she quietly said, I don't have much experience. I'm worried you might be let down." Shannon's amusement was clear as she tried not to laugh. "I really doubt that," I said, "but I don't think that's what she means. We're with a company that works in the Permian Basin oil fields, and we're looking to hire more people soon. Plus, Shannon will graduate from Tech in August with a degree in environmental sciences. If I give her a passing grade in her internship, she could help you understand the rules and requirements." Shannon felt comfortable enough to join in now. "I know a lot about scholarships and grants, especially for students from low-income families. If you'd like, we can chat for a bit." I handed her my business card, pointed out my name at the bottom corner, and mentioned she could call to confirm we're genuine. She smiled shyly, said thank you, and quickly walked away. "It's that charming voice of yours," I teased Shannon. "You could make even a boring ad sound appealing. Just ease up a little when you're talking to teenagers." She pinched my leg, reminding me she had been excited only moments before, so it was my fault if the girl misunderstood her intentions. After that, we enjoyed our new Mexican meal with enthusiasm. Those were some of the best enchiladas I had ever tasted, along with a wonderfully flavorful stew. We finished up, tipped our waitress well using River's card, and strolled around Old Town until Shannon had a plan for before we left the next day. As we entered the old hotel with adobe walls, I received a message from Amy asking if we were still in town. I responded that we were, and she asked if we could meet for lunch and talk some more. I said it was up to her, and suggested the restaurant we had just visited. She replied with a playful wink emoji and said, "I could enjoy that, but I'll see you at noon. Reserve a table." Shannon laughed and asked if women flirted with me every day. I mentioned that I suspected both Amy and our waitress Norma were chatting about her. She teased me with a pinch, saying, "Did I forget to tell you about my curious experiences at college? You know how sorority girls can be." "You did forget, but I'd be happy to listen if you want to share," I replied. She pinched me again and said, "Typical." Then she suggested, "We should change into something comfy and surprise her." It might take some time, but I think she would warm up to you quickly. Still, that might not be the best way to start our working relationship. "Why not?" she teased back. "It worked for us." A soft knock on the door interrupted us a few moments later, around 9:10. I let Shannon open the door, welcomed her in with a hug, and invited her inside. She looked nervous, but it was hard to resist Shannon's warm voice and comforting hug. As she entered, she took in the space and seemed happy to see the table, desk, love seat, and chair. She was about to sit in the chair, but I got there first, leaving her on the love seat. Shannon noticed Norma's nervousness and became all business. We reviewed her grades from high school and community college, talked about her exam scores and her interests. We also touched on her activities, which had quieted down once she turned 16 and began working to help support her family. As she became more relaxed, her personality shone through, and I found her quite delightful. She and Shannon even started joking with each other, with Shannon playfully warning her about the challenges of sorority life. Norma responded with a teasing question. "How do you know how innocent I am?" Shannon took the bait and said, "In that case, maybe we should discuss that other offer we mentioned at the restaurant," and draped her arm casually over the back of the love seat. Norma blushed deeply and quickly said, "I'm supposed to call my mom at 10 to let her know when I'll be home." I was about to suggest we take her home, but Shannon couldn't resist adding, "Okay, tell her tomorrow before class." Norma paused to think. I could see her considering the options, but I felt that it was time to wrap things up. "Call your mom, read my name and business details from my card, and let her know that my girlfriend and I are bringing you home after talking about a job opportunity." She took out her older iPhone and made the call. Mom picked up right away. She followed my instructions, and Mom said she'd be waiting. We piled into the front seat of my truck, with Shannon sitting in the middle. Norma gave me her address, which I entered into the GPS, and we drove towards her home. Before Shannon could start saying anything else to the girl, I turned to Norma and said, "If your dad is a hard worker, doesn't have problems with drugs or alcohol at work, and wants a better job, tell him to call River Payton, who is also on the card. We have crews all over New Mexico, but none close enough to Santa Fe for daily commutes. We do have RV camps near the work sites where he can stay and get meals for free. The same goes for you. We may be able to provide a laptop with some online training, but at some point you might need to move to the new office in Orla, Texas. You can also study online for less than a community college, and if you do well, River might even cover the costs for you, like he did for me. What do you think? I think tonight might be the luckiest night of my life. You've given me hope where I had little, and I can't wait to talk to Dad and call Mr. Payton. I think we might feel the same way in a few years." We were lucky to meet Shannon as well, and so far she has been great. She's only been on the job for a few days, but she impressed the assistant commissioner and director for oil, gas, and minerals today. We're living at the man camp in Orla, too, so we can help you if you move down there. Her home was a worn, single-wide trailer in a rough part of town, but there was a small lawn, a couple of flower beds, and an old but nice pickup in the driveway. It reminded me of where I grew up, minus my dad's old trucks and tools scattered around. When we arrived, Norma's mom opened the door. Norma started to get out but paused, looked at Shannon and then at me, and said, "I know you were joking earlier, but for someone like me, being with both of you would be a dream. Shannon is so beautiful and you seem strong and kind. I'm not sure I could have said no." We were joking, but honestly, Norma, I would be very happy to be with you if I weren't with Shannon. I told her that at the restaurant. You are a smart and beautiful young woman, and I don't want you to ever doubt yourself again. Now go inside, talk to your dad, think about your options, and call River when you decide. We hope to see you again, but if not, it's been a pleasure meeting you." Shannon then added, "I'm really sorry about teasing you so much. I'm used to college life, especially being in a sorority, where teasing and joking around is part of the experience. I agree with everything Theo said, and I hope to see you again. I'm not sure how Shannon managed it, but even though she was full of energy on the way back to the hotel and kept us both awake for most of the night, she was up early, excited about shopping. She insisted that we shower and get ready to eat at the buffet before heading to the stores that opened at 8. I was feeling pretty tired, but I went along with her. The painting of the Guadalupe Mountains didn't inspire me like it did her. I pulled out my credit card, but she said it was her treat, so I let her pay. I was still sleepy when we arrived at the Southwestern clothing store, but it was fun to watch Shannon model different clothes. She was keen on buying some colorful skirts or dresses and boots to match them. There was a bright knee-length dress with knee-high boots that I didn't think showcased her legs well enough, but she really wanted it, and I thought I would buy it if her next choice showed a bit more skin. She beamed, dashed off, and returned with some boots and a skirt made of chocolate suede with leather fringe, and a beautifully designed blouse that had a bold neckline. The skirt looked fairly modest, but the fringe made it eye-catching. I suggested she take a seat, and while it would have to wait until later in the season, I thought it was worth it for her wardrobe. Next, she chose a denim skirt with a striking gold zipper that caught the eye and made it hard not to notice her. She paired it with a snug, semi-transparent top and a loose white shirt with gold details. I thought she looked fantastic, but it made me rethink our plans, wondering if going to a bar in that outfit was a good idea. Her final pick was a navy jumpsuit that featured a zipper running down the front, which highlighted her figure. It was a subtle but striking choice. Shannon could have kept shopping, and I would likely have bought it all for her, but we had a lunch appointment at noon, and it was already almost 11. We still needed to dress nicely. She casually suggested that I wear jeans and a company polo shirt and then headed to the bathroom. The great thing about her natural beauty is that she doesn't need much time to get ready. I was surprised when she came out in the denim skirt, top, boyfriend shirt, and the colorful cowboy boots she had decided to buy. "Just so you know, we're meeting the director of OGM, right? The one we want to impress?" I asked. "I know, and you just need to trust me. Greg won't be there, and she's interested in both of us for reasons beyond the usual business talk. Let's grab our hats and walk over. If she asks, we can say we only brought one set of business clothes. She won't be let down." Amy rushed in just after we got settled in a corner where our favorite waitress was working the lunch shift today. Norma's uniform was meant to be cute, but she made it even more appealing, and Amy noticed when Norma seated her. Amy also saw my jeans and logo shirt when I stood up to say hello, and she almost stumbled over her chair when Shannon stood up too. In a flash, I realized Shannon had it figured out. Amy might be a stunning blue-eyed brunette, married with 2 lovely kids, but she had a playful side. I wondered how many others knew this about her. Shannon picked a square table and Amy sat between us, looking a bit uncertain about which side she wanted to join in on today. Shannon apologized for our casual attire and shared our made-up reason. Amy said it was fine since we didn't expect another meeting, and soon our chat moved through different topics until after we finished eating. When Norma came to clean up, I asked, "What did your dad think, Norma?" With excitement, she replied, "Thank you so much, Mr. Carr. He was like a new person after talking with Mr. River this morning, so hopeful and happy. He starts work in Orla on Monday, so we're driving down on Sunday. Mr. River is letting our whole family live in a nice 5th wheel with 2 bathrooms, a bedroom, and a bunkhouse." Shannon asked, "So you will be going too?" "Yes, ma'am," Norma said with joy. "My professor said I could join classes online, just like students did back in 2020. I'm so thrilled I can hardly keep up with my orders." "And what did Mr. River say about your office manager position?" Shannon inquired. "Oh, yes. I begin training on Monday with Miss Katrina, and I will be paid. He even offered to pay my mom to keep the office and any empty trailers clean and make the place feel more welcoming. Isn't that wonderful? You changed our lives overnight. I can't thank you enough." Shannon's playful wink made Norma blush bright red as she hurried back to clear our table. I added, "That's wonderful news, Norma. Tell your dad to recommend other good workers who are responsible and clean. We often need more good help, and we may need a lot of them soon." Mr. River told him the same thing, and Dad started making a list this morning after their call. "You have my number. Call me once you know what size U-Haul you need, and I'll help you arrange it. We can cover the costs for your move, all right?" She paused, her eyes filled with tears, and began to cry softly. Shannon got up, hugged her, petted her, and whispered soft words. She soon calmed down, looked determined, and came over to my side of the table. She leaned in, wrapped her arms around me, and gave me a kiss on the cheek. Shannon smiled brightly, and then Norma said, "You are like some kind of savior or angel. I shared my sad story, and you made everything better for me and my family. I'm so overwhelmed I can hardly think. But I can't wait for Sunday. Thank you for being so kind." She went back to her work, cleared the table, and left. Amy had watched quietly, but now she spoke up. "This is what I found out about you and River Peyton when I checked with landowners, state inspectors, and other oil service companies. You pay your staff well, provide housing, food, and insurance, and take care of their families. Because of this, you have the best workers in the oil field. That's a smart business move. I can't say much about the bid sheets you will receive soon, but you should prepare for more workers and equipment. I think you'll need it." I paid while she and Shannon chatted, and then we walked her out to her car. She opened her car door and paused. I don't think my little disguise worked on you two. I knew yesterday it didn't fool Shannon. I have to be careful for obvious reasons, and I care about my husband and family, but if either of you ever wants to hang out, just let me know. She got in and I shut her door. She backed out and drove away. Well, I guess I did great, Shannon cheered happily. You did, and it annoys me, I replied. I've known since we met that I'd have to spend my life keeping you safe from some guys, but now I worry about some women too. It seems like everyone likes you. She laughed. I can only speak from high school and college, but yes, that seems to be true. I do catch the attention of some people, and some are not so nice, so you definitely need to protect me. I stopped at the desk to pay for late checkout, and then went through more playful banter with my spirited friend before we collected our things and drove away as the sun began to set. We arrived home around 11, so we dropped our bags in the other bedroom and went to bed. That simple choice would change our lives the next day. I woke up before her and enjoyed watching her sleep. Her wavy golden hair framed her lovely face, and the gentle curve of her neck was all that showed above the sheet. I could have watched her for hours. To me, she is as beautiful as famous art and legends. My view may be shaped by love, but it is what matters most to me. I still believe I am right because of how people react to us. Her bright green eyes opened. She stretched like a cat and pulled my head down for a kiss. She moved closer and made those sweet sounds I have grown fond of, then deepened the kiss. Knowing we didn't have time for this, I gently broke the kiss and reminded her, "We have breakfast with Katrina and River in Pecos at 9. We need to clean up and leave soon." She sighed in frustration, but got out of bed and hurried to the bathroom to shower. I needed to step out for a moment, so I went to the parking area outside. In a place like this, it felt okay to do that. She soon emerged, wrapped in a towel, and playfully urged me to hurry. I laughed as I took my shower and moved things around the room to find my boots from last night. I noticed some papers, but didn't pay them much mind. She did, though. "What's this?" she asked, holding up tickets to a reunion. "Something I let Julie talk me into. I forgot about it. Just tossed them out." "No way. You never tell anyone about your hometown or family. Unless you're embarrassed to go with me instead of Julie, we are going—" "Oh, come on. It's 7 hours away. I left for a reason. Julie convinced me to buy the tickets, but I never planned to go. You know that song by Cross Canadian Ragweed? It's called You're Always 17 in Your Hometown. Okay, I'll play it for you on the way to Pecos. I was a wild teenager and my family was just as happy to see me go. When I got the invitation, I was surprised anyone even knew where I was." "Let's just go to Pecos," she said. "I don't care who you were at 17. You're 28 now, a successful businessman with a great girlfriend. You're not too bad looking either. I want to show those people how far you've come." Her words sounded better than I thought, so I played the song for her. She didn't seem to mind it. "That's not you, and we're going. It's the 3rd weekend of September, so we have time. By then, I hope to finish school and maybe find a young millionaire to marry. I want someone who loves me for me, not just for my looks, but I think I can make it happen." That set the plan in motion. It seems we need to spend some time online looking at rings, stones, and settings to understand her preferences better. I am determined not to let her slip away this time. Katrina made an amazing breakfast. We had hot cakes with honey or 3 kinds of syrup, crispy bacon, sausage patties, and scrambled eggs. What started as light conversation during breakfast turned serious when we moved to the office with our coffee. I asked Shannon to share the report about our meeting with the assistant commissioner and director, and I filled everyone in on the informal meeting with Amy scheduled for the next day. River chuckled and said, "You two make a fantastic team. You win over the women while Shannon impresses the men. Katrina and I have pulled that off a few times, right, dear?" She smiled and giggled, which made me curious about their past experiences, but I decided to focus on River's comment. True, Shannon impresses the men, but it's not just men. Just yesterday, a certain director made a bold move towards her. I aimed to tease Shannon, but her sharp comeback had us laughing. She shrugged and said, "As we say in Chio, why limit ourselves?" Once the laughter settled, and Shannon clarified she was joking, but admitted she had received interest from both men and women, we shifted our focus to the Alanese family. Mom, Karen Stockton Alanese, a striking blonde with blue eyes, was cut off by her family after her second year in college for marrying someone from a different background. She and David had 4 kids in 8 years, with their eldest being Norma, and she had not returned to work since. A quick call to her past employers showed she was a great worker, so River was looking into options beyond cleaning and landscaping with local plants. Since she studied botany in college, that might be her best path. David had tried every role in the oil field except cleanup, but River saw his intelligence and eagerness to learn. With the right training, he'll be a valuable team member in no time. I've already received 6 calls from his co-workers asking about job openings. We didn't chat with Norma for long, so we'll rely on your assessment of her skills. Katrina will introduce her to our methods and software next week, and we'll go from there. Any thoughts? Theo and Shannon shared a glance before Theo spoke up. First off, she has a pleasant appearance, so keep that in mind for your plans. Also, we found her to be smart and quick, and we believe she possesses the strong work ethic needed to balance a job and take classes. She gets embarrassed easily, but she's a young woman ready to grow, so having a job and support for her college studies should help her do that. We think she has faced some tough situations with people who have power and money, but she has stayed strong because she cares about her family. We believe her confidence will grow with her success, but she can be jumpy and easily scared. Shannon showed that when she teased her the night we first met. This could be a challenge when she deals with upset suppliers, competitors, and stubborn government offices, so we should consider that too. She will be a project, but I believe she will become a great and loyal employee we can rely on for years. Katrina said, "Wow, I'm impressed, Miho. You focused on her feelings and emotions instead of just her looks. This shows how much you've grown since a few years ago." Well, having you, Glenda, my wife, and someone I can't forget, has helped me learn more about the feelings of women. I might not fully understand it, but I try my best. Shannon, what do you want to add? I want to know who the one you can't forget is. Look in the mirror, I joked back. She jumped up, walked around, and sat on my lap. She gave me a sweet kiss that lasted until River warned, "Okay, that's enough, or we won't get anything done today. And young lady, as your internship supervisor, I can assign you to someone else so my partner can work." She bounced up, saluted, and said, "Yes, sir. I'll be more careful from now on, sir." River laughed, and Katrina shook her head. "She has you figured out, honey. You don't stand a chance, so don't even try." Shannon smiled at Katrina, then became serious. "Can you explain why he doesn't want to go to his high school reunion? He's successful, so I think he'd want to go back and show off to his old classmates. Brad certainly did that a few months ago." "That's not my story to share, sweetheart, but I will say he connects with Norma and her family on a personal level. You should talk about it, but he is very shy when it comes to discussing his family, his school, or his hometown." "I'm right here, you know," I reminded them. "Are you really? Or is part of you still hidden?" Shannon replied. I looked at Katrina, then River, and asked, "So what does our day look like?" All I had planned was this breakfast meeting. Sure, we could sit here, drink coffee, and chat all day, but the purpose of this meeting was for you to tell us about the luncheon with Amy Wentworth. I haven't heard much except that she showed interest in our intern. "Anything else we should know?" River asked. "Actually, she hinted that we would be very happy when the bids come out. She suggested we should start preparing so we're ready to go when the contracts are awarded. That's how I understood her message, right, intern?" "Pretty close. She was a bit more subtle, but that was the general idea," Shannon confirmed. "Good. That's exactly what I wanted to hear," River said. "Shannon, are you ready to do whatever it takes if that's what she expects?" Shannon grinned. "Oh, definitely. If it comes to that, I'll make sure we get those contracts." The group watched her closely, unsure if she was joking or being serious. After a long pause, a small smile finally broke through on her face. "Okay, you had me fooled there for a second." River laughed. "Remind me not to invite you to poker night." Then River turned his attention to me, his expression serious. "Now, partner, what's on your mind?" I took a deep breath and began. "Shannon, you remember that rundown trailer we saw last night? Well, imagine it even worse. Picture a broken-down shack surrounded by rusty old trucks. That was my family's home." I paused before continuing, the memories heavy. "My dad, he wasn't the best. He drank a lot and took his anger out on us, on my mom, me, and even my younger brothers sometimes. I went to school more times than I can count with black eyes and bruises. Sometimes the bruises didn't show, but the pain was still there. Nobody ever stepped in to help, not even the school staff. The sheriff? He was part of the family that pretty much controlled everything in our county, and they didn't care about people like us. I took another breath, steadying myself. When I was 12, I tried to report my dad, but the sheriff just told me to do as I was told and not make trouble. The beatings didn't stop, but I stopped being afraid. By the time I was 14, I was ready to stand up to him. One night, when he was drunk, I confronted him. I made it clear that the abuse was over and that things were going to change. The room was quiet as I finished, everyone understanding what I had left unsaid. I got off him, tucked the gun into my pants, and told him I would be more aware from now on. If he ever hurt Mom or my brothers, I'd make sure he regretted it. That set the tone for our relationship during high school, but I worried that one day he might find a gun like mine and hurt me while I slept. He did start to notice my achievements in sports, even if he first said I was wasting my time playing games instead of working. I reassured him that I would work on weekends and throughout the summer, but during the school nights, I would practice and play sports. I told him it was my life and he could deal with it. So I played on. I found success in sports, gaining recognition for myself, the school, and our town. He managed to get some jobs thanks to my efforts. He even received praise for my achievements, mistakenly believing they reflected on him or that he had a hand in my success. In a way, he did. The school staff catered to the Smithermans and other wealthy students, but by the time I turned 17, they knew better than to challenge me. I brought my tough attitude to the football field, basketball court, track, and even to classes, yet no one failed me or put me in detention. I was known as the smart but difficult car kid, but I still made second-team All-State in football, All-District in basketball, and earned medals in 2 events at the state track meet. Shannon knows some of this story, but she still pushes me about it, and since you have never heard the whole thing, I want to share it all with you now. Why don't I want to go to the reunion and see my old classmates? Honestly, I was quite angry in high school, and I didn't really have any friends there. Yes, I spent time with a few girls, but they wouldn't care to see me now. Even though I was good at sports, my teammates were more annoyed with me than grateful, and the Smitherman families were still upset that I was the best player instead of one of their sons. So, what's the point? It's certainly not about going back to reconnect with old friends or see my family. Even the little brothers I looked after probably hold a grudge against me for leaving them behind, so forget all that. How about I take all of you fishing on Red Bluff Lake instead? After I finished speaking, there was a pause until Katrina chimed in. Theo, I've been following updates about your hometown and school online. Do you know a guy named Will Callahan? He's a bit older than me, seems like he married one of the wealthy girls, but things didn't go well. That's true, but more importantly, he and a group he was part of wrote and sang songs about the corruption in Cowtown and Cow County. They played a big role in exposing the issues there. A lot of the Smithermans and their supporters are now in prison, and some locals focused on anti-corruption have taken office. Some of the people are likely your classmates and teammates. I'm not saying this makes everything better with Cowtown, but good things have happened, and a lot of the bad seems to have disappeared. That's interesting, but like you said, it doesn't really change anything for me. I'm still the car kid, angry and tough at 17, and that won't change. Feeling frustrated with my attitude, River said, Come on, it will. You show up with this inspiring person by your side, and Katrina and I are there with you for support. We can tell everyone about your success in business, your college degree, and your bright future. Just be nice to everyone and let them see that you're not the same person you were at 17. You might be surprised by how people respond. I don't know what to expect from your family, but you can't choose your family. If they're still difficult, maybe you can help them out with a nicer home and a little money. It won't cost you much, and it might create some goodwill. If not, you will still earn some good karma. I took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and asked, So, if I do this, you all will come with me the 3rd weekend of September? Because I know I can't do it alone. They all agreed, and then River joked about how I was so confident at the reunion in Santa Fe, but nervous about my own. I didn't respond, but many thoughts raced through my mind. The Alanis family arrived on Sunday to find a feast of goat, beans, and rice being cooked. There were more people helping them unload than they needed. The younger kids were excited about the nice trailer they were moving into. Mama shed some tears, Dad looked overwhelmed, and Norma gave hugs and thanks to everyone who helped with the move or made food for their welcome celebration. El Jefe, La Señora Jefe, El Segundo, and La Chica Linda received most of the praise, but we made sure to acknowledge everyone who did the hard work. Yes, we provided the goats and other groceries, and we let everyone know we would appreciate their help in welcoming the newcomers as they had been welcomed before. But it was the men and women who cooked, set up the party area, and moved the family's belongings who really deserved the thanks. They did receive appreciation, but Norma also gave a heartfelt thank you to Shannon and me, and she showed her gratitude to Mr. River and Mrs. Katrina. She was sweet and really knew how to hug Shannon, River, and Katrina agreed. The celebration was a lot of fun. It was a chance to get to know Karen and David better and enjoy their lively kids. It ended at 10 because everyone had to work or train early the next day. Reports from the trainers were good, and it looked like we had really found something special with Norma, Karen, and David. It was also a pleasant surprise to see that the bid sheets we received on the orphaned wells looked like we had written them ourselves. Shannon and I gave each other high fives, and then I hugged her and gave her a twirl. Our intern surprised us all summer. She managed to smooth things over between Jerry, Doris, and me. They weren't really upset after I changed the story from one about a love triangle, and we kept a good working relationship. We even received new job offers from other ranchers after my adventures at the reunion. While we didn't secure new contracts from them, Jerry and Tom didn't seem bothered by us. After spending a day with Shannon, the ladies were impressed. Doris apologized for her daughter's behavior and shared that Julie felt truly sorry for her actions. A few days later, we were offered a contract for 30 more sections of land. I think Shannon will earn another A and keep her perfect grades, but it's too soon to tell. Shannon's graduation in mid-August was a nice break from the heat. We arrived in Lubbock a few days early to shop and relax. The ceremony was smaller than the spring graduation Brad and I attended, but no one had a cheering group like Shannon's, and no one got a louder cheer than when Shannon Alana Barnes graduated with top honors. Her family had made dinner reservations at the same steakhouse and dance hall we had enjoyed on that memorable night. The food was just as delicious as I remembered. The band at the dance hall was better, and we didn't get teased as much about the earlier incident that had started with Shannon. Being with her family parents, grandparents, and lovely sisters with their boyfriends after more than 5 years was a special treat. Brad and I had kept a good business relationship during that time, and had grown a friendship from a short moment we shared while waiting for our own graduation. However, being with him and his wife made our bond feel deeper and more meaningful. Glenda and Cindy were not there, but sent thoughtful gifts of French perfume. Everyone enjoyed catching up with Katrina and River. His surprising job offer amazed Shannon and her dad. Brad smiled, knowing we had won as many state contracts as possible, and they were good deals. But we needed more helpers, and we needed them fast. Shannon and I would be responsible for recruiting and training new workers for a range of jobs, and her brother knew how persuasive she could be in getting people on board. It was a big opportunity for someone starting out, and River was always willing to reward good work. We talked, we danced, and we took turns congratulating the new graduate. She took a moment to soak in the sun and felt thrilled about the job offer she had just accepted. She had danced with her father, grandfather, and the rest of us. After a quick chat with the band, she, her mother, grandmother, and sisters performed some fun songs from the past, as well as popular dances from today. Others joined in, but soon enough, most people gathered around to watch. After each song, the crowd cheered loudly for them. Angela and Kelly looked even more radiant than I remembered. Mom, Susan, was charming, and Grandmother Cecilia at 70 was more graceful and energetic than I thought someone her age could be. If Susan and Cecilia were any indication of Shannon's future, her future husband would be quite lucky. It had been a wonderful day until a tall, confident cowboy approached us. He completely overlooked me and asked Shannon to dance. Although she had danced with others, there was something about this cowboy that rubbed me the wrong way. Everyone at the table noticed my reaction, and before Shannon could respond, I spoke up. I can see you think highly of yourself, but what gives you the right to come here, ignore me, and ask my fiancé to dance without asking me first? Shannon quickly placed her hand on my arm as soon as he appeared. The others at our table had already shifted toward the edge of their seats, ready to step in if needed. Oddly, River just sat there smiling, but Shannon seemed unfazed by my outburst. Instead of urging me to calm down or speaking to the cowboy, she looked right at me and said, "Fiancé? I don't remember you asking me to marry you, and I don't see a ring on my hand. So I'm free to dance with anyone I like." With a bright smile, she turned back to the cowboy and stood up to dance. I could feel the tension at the table as everyone held their breath, and the cowboy looked pleased. In that moment, I dropped to one knee, holding something in my left hand as I reached for hers. I managed to catch her eye and said, "Shannon Alana Barnes, you are the one true love of my life. Would you honor me by marrying me? I'm not deserving of you, but no one else is, and no one could ever love you as much as I do." She smiled at everyone around the table, and then looked back at me with those bright green eyes. Suddenly she knelt down, her expression turning serious. "You rescued me on this very dance floor over 5 years ago, and I've loved you since that moment. I can't tell you how many times I wrote Mrs. Theodore Monroe Carr in my notebooks at school, dreaming of being with you while we were apart. You are my soulmate and my life partner, with or without a ring. But I am honored to accept your marriage proposal and this beautiful ring that I haven't seen since Thursday at the jewelry store downtown." The first part of her words sounded practiced but sincere. The last part had a playful tone, showing that she saw through the act. We kissed while still on our knees, then stood up. I introduced the tall and handsome Miguel Alemán to the group. He congratulated me with a handshake and a hug, and Shannon thanked him for his part in the surprise, promising him the second dance of our engagement evening. I gave her a few minutes to show the ring to everyone else, then signaled the band leader. I led Shannon to the dance floor for our official engagement dance. The song was the same one we danced to years ago, Silver Wings. Miguel took my seat, greeted River and Katrina, and asked how they were doing. When we returned, Shannon grabbed Miguel for his dance as the band played Amarillo by Morning. That charming cowboy looked like a better match for her than I did, but she came back and sat in my lap, smiling. Her father asked, "How did you know, Shannon?" Brad and I talked about it, and we were completely surprised. We prepared for anything. Angela agreed, and my fiancé explained, "It started Thursday when he took me shopping and we ended up at the best jewelry store in town. The second clue was when the jeweler showed me this unique ring that was obviously custom-made. The big diamond was surrounded by beautiful pieces of turquoise, agate, and topaz that he said were from West Texas or New Mexico. I loved the ring, but I knew something like that would be really expensive, so I asked to see other options. Instead of being happy that I was looking at others, Theo seemed disappointed. Later, while I was looking at necklaces, he and the salesman went to the back. After we left, he asked me which ring I liked best, no matter the price. I told him it was the unique ring I saw first, but that I also liked the less expensive oval-cut diamond we looked at last. He just smiled and said both were nice. Nothing else was mentioned. I had completely forgotten about the rings and was just enjoying my graduation party when this guy walked up and disrespected my boyfriend. Theo seemed to react how I expected, but I was holding his arm and there was no tension. We've all seen him in action before, and he's strong and fierce, right? He sounded tough, but his body language didn't show that intense side I had seen before, and I thought something felt off. Then I realized he had called me his fiancé, and at that moment I noticed that Miguel looked totally relaxed and calm. That was when everything clicked in my mind. I played along, but I already knew. For a proposal, it wasn't a boring idea, and it wasn't some cliché moment on a mountaintop as the sun set. It was tied to our first meeting, so I gave him a high score for creativity, but his smart girlfriend wasn't fooled by his trick. Her smile turned to a smirk at that. "But you still said yes, so it wasn't all a failure, right?" I asked. She grinned and said, "There was no way I would have said no to you, so don't feel too proud. Still, I'll admit it was sweet, especially considering how we met. I love you even more for planning it, and I will always remember and cherish your proposal." "And now the real work begins," Mama Susan announced. "Shannon, ladies, we need to have a planning session tonight or tomorrow morning." Shannon cuddled deeper into my lap and replied, Not tonight, Mom. I have other plans." Everyone at the table shared knowing chuckles and smiles, and Susan said, "Okay, right after breakfast in my room. It's a Mustatin meeting, so don't stay out too late tonight." Yes, Shannon did have plans, and yes, we enjoyed ourselves a little too much. It wasn't my fault. I thought we were done several times, but whenever she looked at her ring, we were right back into it. We made it to breakfast, and she got to the planning session on time, leaving the men to tease me and share stories about weddings. Their wise advice was to speak up early, set my boundaries, and then step aside unless my opinion was asked for. If it was asked, I needed to be cautious of snags. That sounded simple, especially since I couldn't think of anything I wanted to demand or any hard rules. But I underestimated my girl. They came out from the planning session with a plan. Highland Park UMC at 7 p.m. on Saturday, October 22nd. Lilacs and lace. 4 bridesmaids and 5 groomsmen, plus the maids of honor and best man, along with others in the wedding party. Rehearsal dinner at YO Ranch Steakhouse. Reception at the historic Adolphus Hotel, and a second reception at the man camp when we returned from our honeymoon. I didn't know much about the other places, but they caught my eye, so I looked at River. Hosting a wedding reception in my backyard behind the RV or on the dirt area between the rows of RVs didn't seem very romantic or practical. Katrina and Shannon had a solution, a covered space with tables and benches, along with a place for barbecues and grills. There would also be an area for games like horseshoes and cornhole, a mini gym, and a grassy field where kids and men could play football and soccer. River already had plans for a new row of RVs or park trailers for families south of the second row, but I didn't know about a recreation area in the middle. He didn't seem surprised, so I figured that was one less thing for me to worry about. When I nervously asked about the plans for the parties, Shannon shook her head. "We aren't teenagers anymore, and most of our wedding party will be married. I can't imagine us going to wild parties or any kind of entertainment like that." I kissed her and said, "Thank you. I wouldn't want to be out having fun like that with your brother, Dad, or even River. I'd just spend the whole time worrying about someone making a mistake and their spouses finding out." She laughed and said, "And the same for me. My grandmothers are fun, being experienced rock fans from the 60s, but that doesn't mean I want to see that or anything embarrassing like that." The thought made me pause, but then I laughed and hugged her tighter. Shannon went home separately. I took my truck and she drove her graduation gift, a shiny black Denali XL with tinted windows. Her Wrangler was still there, and I thought if she kept getting more cars, we would need more parking space. It turned out that Katrina and River, and maybe Shannon, had thought of that too. My trailer and the next 2 in the row would be moved to the new area to the south. They would set up a new office where my trailer was, and 2 new park trailers with porches would be placed next. This would let Shannon and me host guests, like her parents, and the third trailer would be for visitors or workers, since the nearest hotels were in Pecos. The old office at the back, with my workout space moved to the gym, was going to become Norma and Katrina's office, with a corner for River if he ever sat still long enough to use it. The new office in front would be the center for our recruiting efforts and provide a place for meetings with state and national officials, inspectors, potential clients, and more. We were about to turn into a community, and I was happy we had drilled that deep well. We got back to work, hiring people from 5 states, including Oklahoma and the Dakotas, as well as from our competitors. The best source for new workers was our current team, who invited friends and acquaintances they trusted to apply. Our workers often knew others who were reliable, and soon we had enough people to start on our first contracts, which began just days after we trained them and had our equipment ready. New teams meant we needed new foremen and crew leaders, and we had many good candidates among our experienced workers. With all these new leaders, we had to manage them well, so we set up a mix of in-person and virtual meetings to stay connected. After all, we were working in a huge area of about 86,000 square miles, 250 miles wide and over 300 miles long. We set up fenced areas for equipment and temporary living spaces near the farthest job sites, but they had to depend on generators and water brought in daily by a company specializing in transportation, another profitable opportunity. With Texas politicians holding hearings about problems with abandoned wells and oil spills, even the most stubborn oil companies began to pay attention. As leaders in our field, oil company executives and their legal teams toured our sites, visited our offices, or invited us to theirs to discuss potential business. I smiled at a few of them. River laughed at others, and soon everyone knew we were the right choice if they wanted proper cleanup and were ready to pay for it. Many lined up for our services while others tried to take shortcuts and ended up hiring us to fix their mistakes after the inspectors paid a visit. Our business was thriving, and we were adding a fourth row of trailers at the camp. That was after the reunion, though. The Eagle Ford Shale project had started before I left. So many hotels were built near the convention center for the reunion. Since the project had moved further east, there was plenty of space available, and we even got special rates that included free breakfast and a happy hour with tacos and quesadillas. We made several stops during our 9-hour drive after crossing I-10 and seeing hills, trees, spring-fed creeks, rivers, and lakes. While it might have been faster to take the river road through Del Rio, I wanted my companions to experience the beauty of the Nueces and Frio Canyons, Leakey, Garner State Park, Concan, and Uvalde. We stopped at places to enjoy the fresh air, listen to the sound of water, and promised to swim when we returned, maybe next summer when it's warmer. From Uvalde, we traveled south through an area called the Winter Garden, known for its rich land and water supply. Sadly, over time, cheaper crops from other countries took over. Some farms were still active thanks to H-E-B, which had loyal customers who preferred local and organic vegetables. But many of the once fertile fields were now filled with weeds and tall grass. As we moved south of Batesville, we entered the brush country, and it was easy to see why it was named that. We were not far from Cowtown, and I felt uneasy. There were many unpleasant memories waiting for me, with only a few good ones. "Pitaya Ventures?" the young woman at the front desk asked. "That sounds familiar, like you're from here, but I don't know that company." "Oh, you're here for the reunion, so you must be local. What's your name?" "This is Katrina Payton and her husband River. This is my fiancé Shannon Barnes, and I'm Theo Carr." "Oh, wow, 46. My dad loved watching you play. Let me call him, he's working in the back." I glanced at the others who were smiling at me. "So maybe not everyone hates you?" Shannon joked. The young woman and a man around 50 came out from behind. She smiled at her father as she brought him forward. "Guess who this is, Dad?" The man looked me over, puzzled, until a spark of recognition lit up his face. He exclaimed, "Theo Carr, 46, the best football player from Cowtown High. It's great to see you." He shook my hand with enthusiasm and introduced himself as Kenneth Hauser, also greeting everyone else. "Happy hour just started in the bar area. We have free drinks and a taco or quesadilla bar if you're hungry after your trip. Let's get your luggage to your rooms, then come join me and my kids in the bar. We'd love to hear about our local football star and share what's new in your hometown." As we rode the elevator, everyone playfully teased me, but it didn't affect my good mood. It felt nice to have someone like Kenneth in town who didn't see me as a failure, which was more than I expected. Katrina and Shannon were ready in just 15 minutes, looking like movie stars in their stylish jeans and shirts. They smelled great, too, which was impressive after our long travel day. I sprayed cologne all over myself, but I still didn't smell great. When we entered the Horseshoe Lounge, Kenneth, his lovely daughter, a young man who looked like Kenneth, and a few others were gathered around some tables they had pushed together. I quickly recognized 2 of the men and 1 of the women, former teammates Bobby and Frankie, along with Frankie's sister, Nita. They jumped up and rushed over to me, crowding around with hugs and questions about where I had been. Nita was a bit more reserved, but I remembered her warm hug and friendly kiss well. This caught Shannon's attention. I introduced everyone, and they warmly welcomed my fiancé and friends. Then they led us to the table for more introductions. One couple was older, around Kenneth's age, and they reminisced about my exciting times playing basketball. "Your jersey numbers were 34 at home and 35 away. Remember that game against Cougar High? You were trailing by 6 points with just 2 minutes left. You were all over their point guard, knocked the ball away, picked it up, and scored at the other end. When they brought the ball back in, you intercepted it and made a great 2-handed dunk, staring down the player who was throwing it in. Their coach called a timeout, and you walked by their bench with a look that everyone tried to imitate but couldn't. Can you show us that again?" Probably not that was just me trying to intimidate them. It didn't really work. They passed cleanly to their big player. True, but you were right on him as soon as he got the ball. He faked a shot, you stayed put, he tried to shoot again, and you blocked it. The guy was 6'7", and you still blocked him. Then you grabbed the ball from one of his teammates and took off toward their basket. Their 6'5" player went with you, ready to block your shot, but you made an amazing dunk instead. He fouled you, you made the free throw, then stole the ball from the inbound play and scored again. You turned a 6-point deficit into a 3-point lead in just over a minute, and at barely 6 you dunked over their 6'5" player. His wife then added, "But you weren't done yet. You fell back into a defensive setup with your teammates. You guys made them waste half the clock, and then you snagged a pass, showing off some impressive dribbling skills to keep them from getting the ball back. It was great, but with just 10 seconds left, even as your coach shouted, 'No, don't shoot,' you pushed your way through 2 defenders, went for the basket, and scored. You had a 5-point lead with 6 seconds left, and they didn't even try to get the ball back in. The number 2 team in the state out in the second round of the playoffs. That game was a blast, just like the first round at regionals. In the finals, we faced the defending state champions and lost badly. They went on to win again 2 games later." "That's true, but they had to double and triple team you to beat us," she said excitedly. "We could talk all night about how he would knock guys out of the game with his tough tackling and his strong drive when he had the ball," Frankie chuckled. "But nothing shows how dedicated Theo Carr is like his self-taught pole vaulting skills. We didn't even have a coach for it, and the only pole we had was old and about 10 feet long. We did have a good landing area, though. Theo had watched vaulters at competitions during junior high and our freshman years. He talked to a few of them about how to vault, learned on his own, and then ran down the runway and jumped over the bar at 8 feet. He even set the bar a foot higher than the pole and cleared it. He was moving so fast that he almost flew past the landing area, but he caught Coach Cano's attention. Soon Cano was reading a book about pole vaulting to Theo at the landing area. That helped, right, TMC? Actually, it did. Neither of us knew what we were doing, and looking back, I am surprised I didn't hurt myself, so I appreciated any coaching, even from a book. Who was it that finally got you a new, longer pole? A car dealership, maybe? I think so, but they just told me someone donated to the Booster Club, and the school used that money to buy me a couple of new poles. They were longer and more flexible, but I didn't know how to use them until the district meet. And then you set a district record at 15 feet, jumped 15, 6 at regionals, and cleared 16 feet at state. When you were getting ready to vault, people would line up around the landing area and pause on the track. TMC was like a knight charging into battle. He might miss his steps and run through. He might go up and fall back, or he might hit it perfectly and fly over the bar, landing safely on his back. It was really exciting to watch, River asked. If you cleared 16 feet at state, didn't you win? Frankie and I laughed. No, the winner jumped 17 feet 9 inches and was upset he missed 18. He went on to vault in college and the Olympics. I think he cleared 19 feet. We continued chatting during happy hour, which Kenneth extended, and then they shared stories about the cleanup that happened after Will Callahan and his bandmates caused trouble with the local government. This went on until the young parents had to pick up their kids, and we agreed to meet at the reunion the next day. The 4 of us rode the elevator to our rooms on the 4th floor, and Katrina started the teasing I expected. No friends. Everyone looked down on him. He wasn't good at much. Okay, but I never said I wasn't good at anything. I wasn't terrible at sports, but I don't remember Bobby and Frankie being such close friends. Shannon rolled her eyes. Maybe they were. Maybe they weren't. But Nita definitely was. I saw the hug and kiss, and the way she looked at you the whole time we were there, so don't try to convince me she was just a maybe friend. She had a point. Nita and I had shared some special moments, and I was her first love. If I had stayed, we might even have gotten married. Seeing her again brought back those memories strongly. Now, how could I explain that to my fiancé? I was about to make an excuse, then stopped. I thought I could say it was nothing, but I can't. You're right. Nita meant a lot to me. I can't say what could have happened if I had stayed, but we were close. But I didn't stick around. I went west, met River and Katrina, got attracted to an 18-year-old who left me, made a few mistakes, including one big one, and then fell in love with the 23-year-old version of the girl who caught my eye. Oh, and she convinced me to come down here, and now she's upset that I had a high school girlfriend. River opened the door, and Katrina said, "Be careful, Shannon. You'll have a 10-year reunion soon, and there might be some old boyfriends there you don't want to deal with." She paused, turned, gave Katrina a playful gesture, and then started laughing. Shannon was determined that night to make me forget about Nita, Pam, Joni, and all the other girls from my past. It was unnecessary, but nice. She had already taken the top spot in my heart, but a guy never gets tired of his partner showing how much she cares. The wake-up call was also unnecessary, but appreciated. I had a big breakfast because I needed the energy, and so did my partner. She looked a bit tired, but of course she had put in a lot of effort. I dressed for the luncheon in my best jeans, boots, and a polo shirt. I felt good and strong, like a classic tough guy. Shannon wore pretty sandals and a lovely sundress that showed off her shoulders and legs, making her look stunning. River saw her and exclaimed, "Wow!" Katrina laughed and said, "Looks like someone's ready to impress." I added, "Yeah, Cowtown hasn't seen anyone like her." And she smiled brightly. She was definitely making an impression. As expected, not too many people showed up. Many classmates had to work that Saturday, others couldn't afford babysitters, and quite a few thought a meet and greet was pointless with the reunion meal and dance happening later. The Smitherman family was there, dressed nicely, but Shannon and Katrina shone in their outfits. Katrina wore a lovely white sundress and sandals that suited her well. We didn't eat much, but my 3 friends were busy talking to everyone at the event. I noticed that the rich people seemed less full of themselves since Will Callahan hired lawyers to help with their problems. Some of their parents had ended up in jail. I realized we would never really be friends, but surprisingly, they bothered me less than before. There were a few moments that surprised me, like when 2 of the least favorite teachers I had looked down at me and whispered to each other after I said I was working in the oil field now. Katrina and Shannon couldn't let that go. Katrina spoke up, saying, "He's actually being humble. Theo and my husband run an oil field services company with contracts worth about $100 million this year." In her polished voice, Shannon added, "Theo has a degree from Texas Tech, but prefers working in business over law, unlike my grandfather, father, and brother in Dallas. By the way, we're getting married the 3rd weekend of October." One of the older guests asked, "What do your children and grandchildren do?" There were many people close by, and laughter followed as they put the rude teachers in their place, leaving them speechless. Another moment came when a Smitherman, who had been a deputy sheriff back when I was younger, made a joke to a group around him saying, "Oh no, here comes one of the car kids, watch your wallets." I took that chance to respond. "Hello there, deputy. Have you gotten into trouble lately? Oh, right. You were fired, weren't you? Who are you bothering now?" I thought he might react angrily, but he just walked away. I didn't understand how he got out on parole while others stayed in jail, as he had been one of the worst around. As he left, his group scattered. River put a hand on my shoulder and quietly said, "You're always the same in your hometown," while patting my back. Katrina added, "Just be better, Theo." I raised an eyebrow and said, "Like how you treated those teachers?" She rolled her eyes and smiled. Shannon looked at me closely and asked, "Is he one of them?" I nodded and told her he was one, but not one of the ones I had trouble with, and she hugged me. We decided to leave a little early and went for a drive. I showed them around town, highlighting the changes from the Eagle Ford discovery and pointing out historic sites from what used to be a rough frontier town. I was driving, and while no one mentioned it, I turned onto Johnson Road. I passed a rundown house with old road graders and dump trucks outside, just like I remembered. What surprised me was a new double-wide trailer a bit further down with Car Electric on the side of a few vans. There was also a new equipment yard nearby, featuring another similar double-wide. A sign reading, "Car Earthworks Road Building and Maintenance Site Prep, Pad Construction, Fencing, and More," was neatly attached to the fence, and a nice pickup truck was parked in front. Maybe I didn't give my brothers enough credit. "Your family?" Shannon asked softly. I nodded, and the drive back to the hotel was quiet as we thought about it. River and I put on our best hats and boots along with our sharp Western-style suits for the evening event. We even wore a bit of silver and turquoise on our belt buckles and watches. Our ladies looked amazing, Shannon wore a beautiful champagne cocktail dress that hugged her figure, paired with matching heels. Her golden hair cascaded in curls, and she carried a clutch that matched her dress. She looked incredibly elegant. Katrina chose a more classic cocktail dress that flared out slightly but showed off her figure well, especially her curves. River was captivated by her, as were many others that night. We presented our tickets and received name tags before searching for a place to sit. As promised, Bobby and Frankie had saved a large table to the right of the bandstand. They waved us over, and I got to reconnect with old friends while Shannon dazzled the crowd with her charm. The Hausers were there, so River and Katrina sat with them. We joined the Floras and Garcias, along with a couple of dozen other classmates. Drinks and conversation flowed freely, though Shannon and I were more reserved. She seemed to know that I needed to stay composed, especially with certain people around. I caught up with everyone and shared stories about my past. Shannon learned more about me through these tales. I had warned her that I could be difficult, but no one seemed to hold it against me tonight. In fact, they treated me like some sort of charming rebel. At 8, our former class president and vice president thanked everyone for attending, reminding us to keep our addresses updated on the website. With a grin that suggested he was joking, the president announced, "The DJ canceled at the last minute, but a local band stepped in to entertain us." Everyone at the table buzzed with excitement, except for Shannon and me. I was feeling relaxed when the host announced, "Let's give a big round of applause to the little band that started just southeast of town on Billy Goat Hill. Here are two of Cowtown High's finest, Will and Woody. Along with some amazing singers and musicians, I present to you the Grammy-winning Billy Goat Hill Pundits." I had been away in the deserts of West Texas and New Mexico for 10 years. I knew of the band and recognized some of their songs, but I hadn't really listened to them. Shannon, however, was just as excited as everyone else in the crowd. We danced a bit, but many of the songs were meant for listening. I found myself feeling emotional, especially when they sang about the town and people I had strong feelings against. Lila and Lena sang about serious topics that really affected me and Shannon. Honestly, it was very moving. I realized I wasn't alone in feeling hurt by the unfair and harmful powers in our lives. These musicians had the courage to write about it. Wow, that took real guts. Meeting them during the break was thrilling. When Will said, "I remember you. You were the running back and linebacker on that team that made it 2 rounds into the playoffs. You're the angry young man I wrote a song about. I'll tell them you inspired it when we play it in the second set." I was shocked, but Shannon looked amazed. "That song is about you? Wow, I love that song. We talked about it in class." I walked back to the table in a daze, and my friends started asking me if I knew the song was about me. To be honest, I didn't even know it existed. The second set brought a different vibe. It was less about protest and more about dance. They played all sorts of music. Woody, Lila, and Lena took turns leading the songs, filling the floor with energy. If Shannon wasn't already the star of the show, she definitely became one during an upbeat dance sequence. She was having a blast with Nita, Joni, and another woman I didn't recognize. They were all enjoying themselves, and even Lena jumped off stage to dance with them. She could move well and fit right in with that lively group. That night, we all felt free to dance with anyone. These were my friends from high school, so I felt comfortable asking others to dance or joining in. Katrina was another popular dancer, even with the age gap, and River seemed to be getting along well with the ladies, too. It took me a couple of drinks to finally ask someone to dance besides Shannon, even though she had danced with several of my classmates already. I chose Pam because Shannon didn't know about our past together, and Pam was someone I found really attractive. She was taller and slimmer than I preferred, but she had long legs and a nice figure, which I liked back in high school. Pam was married and seemed confident in herself, so she didn't hesitate to turn away and catch my eye while we danced. Her husband watched and cheered for her, which made her feel even more free and relaxed around me. I knew her husband. He was from a rival high school nearby and had a fun personality back then. It didn't seem like he had changed much. After the dance, I talked with Joe, Pam's husband, while Joni came to pick me up. This was a slow song, and the lights sparkled off Joni's long, straight hair, reminding me of happy times on Billy Goat Hill. She seemed to sense my thoughts and asked, "Are you thinking about the same memories? The soft music and lying on that foam pad in your truck?" I've forgotten many things about our town and high school, but the image of the full moon shining on you is not one of them, I said. She winked and replied, Me too, but let's keep that between us. Sound good? Sound good. As we danced, she moved closer to me and softly sighed. I sometimes dream I'm back there with you. You were amazing, and I bet you're even better now. You were fantastic too, Snow. You made high school much better for me until you got curious. What a silly girl I was. But Nita made that last semester nice for you, and just so you know, she's going to want to dance with you soon, so be ready. I looked around and saw Shannon enjoying herself with Bobby. Snow was right. Nita took my hand as soon as I returned from dancing, and I was a bit surprised when I heard the familiar beat. We had danced to that song many times before, and the smile on her face told me she was prepared for this moment. We moved in sync and danced around the floor, really enjoying ourselves. I appreciated that she kept a good distance since my fiancé was watching. Nita danced well, and we ended with a stylish move before I walked her back to our table. My fiancé was waiting, and she took my hand as soon as I was free. The BGH pundits were performing a touching song written by Will, as Woody announced before starting. Shannon pressed close to me, encouraging me to show off a bit during the turns of the song. The next song was another heartfelt piece, sung by Lena. By the end, I felt a strong rush of emotions, and Shannon had a small smile, as if she felt proud of her impact. Honestly, it seemed easy for her to get that reaction from me. All it took was a look or a gentle touch. There was a moment of anticipation. Will took the microphone from Woody and said, It took me 5 years after finishing school, a difficult marriage, and some tough lessons for me to stand up for what's right. This song is about someone from a tough background who stood tall against them at just 17. I can't promise every word is perfect, but it reflects the story that grew around this young man by the time he completed school, before he seemed to vanish. Listen closely, 46, and let me know during intermission how much rings true. Will's deep voice painted a vivid picture, and he did it well. He sang about the struggles I faced, my frustration with a school system that rewarded privilege, and how rules often changed based on background. He spoke out against a corrupt sheriff, stood up to 2 rough deputies, and challenged the people in power who tried to silence me for telling the truth about my family's troubles. The chorus of the song celebrated my strength and spirit, highlighting how my anger fueled my drive in sports, and how my peers tried to steer clear of my temper. The next chorus also touched on my choice to date outside my background. I still remembered the criticism Nita and I faced for that. I was relieved this was my first time hearing the song. It brought tears to my eyes, and I tried to keep my serious expression as the spotlight turned to me at the end. With Shannon holding me tightly and crying on my shoulder, it was hard to stay strong. But I made it through the song and the applause without showing any weakness. To do otherwise would have tarnished the song and the story it told. I nodded to Will in thanks, and he tipped his hat back at me. It was quite a moment for a car boy. The BGH pundits always played classic country and rock music during breaks, allowing everyone to dance with their partners or loved ones. Will, Lila, Woody, and Lena came over to Shannon and me, and Will asked, "What do you think?" I shrugged. I can't argue with what you sang. It doesn't bring back my best memories, but it's true. Lila chimed in. You wouldn't believe how emotional Will was while he wrote this. He was a bit grumpy for 2 days, and then he was really proud. We weren't sure about including what some called protest songs on our 3rd album, but Will told us his story and insisted we listen. He played and sang with so much feeling that we all paid attention, and even tough Woody started to cry. Lena added, when he finished, Will looked at Woody and said, "If only we had the courage to stand up back then." Woody admitted he didn't, but he was just happy that our first 2 albums made a difference. As you probably know, this became the first #1 on the 3rd album and even reached #2 on the pop charts. Will is a fantastic songwriter, and to create something so strong in about 18 hours incredible. Woody quietly mentioned, "Lena, it's his first time hearing the song. He's been working in the oil fields in Texas, and there aren't many radio stations out there." She covered her mouth in surprise and asked me, "So, what do you think of the song? I'm not asking if it's true like Will did, just your thoughts." I looked at her for a long moment, trying to stay composed enough to answer. Shannon's grip on me had loosened, but it tightened again. She said, "I've been holding this strong guy during the song, and now I can tell you he's moved, but he might not share that in front of others. He's usually pretty reserved around people, even though he's a big softy with me and his friends." That gave me the boost I needed. She's right, as always. Honestly, I was deeply touched. I had no idea anyone understood what I was going through. I only returned for this reunion because she and Katrina challenged me for avoiding a place I disliked and the people I thought didn't like me. It turns out they were right. There are many good people here, and luckily my old classmates and teammates are not holding grudges. I know I was not great in high school, and a lot of that was the anger Will expressed so well. I guess I was really angry and scared to show anything but my anger. So I looked at the world as an angry young man. I gave up a lot by acting this way, but it helped me get through each day and night. "Dude, you thought we didn't like you?" Frankie asked, surprised. "Not at all. We admired you. You did and said the things we wished we could but didn't have the guts to do. But when Will started taking down the bad people in charge, we had to decide if we wanted to join him or stay on the sidelines. And that's when you came in," Bobby added. "We got a group of several hundred together at Billy Goat on a cold winter night, and Sierra, Tim, and a few others urged us to stand up and fight back. I don't remember who said it first, but like TMC became our rallying cry. Honestly, if we seemed quiet, it was because we looked up to you, not because we didn't like you. You were what we wanted to be, but didn't have the courage to be." Nita then spoke up, her voice shaky with feeling. "But we did when it counted. Every adult Smitherman and every corrupt follower is in prison or on parole, and the good people run this town and the school as it should be for everyone's benefit. We weren't as tough as Theo in high school, but we were at age 23, and we finished what he started." Wow! Looks like I had a bigger impact than I thought. I pulled Bobby, Frankie, and his little sister into a group hug with Shannon and me and quietly said, "I care about you guys, but don't tell anyone I said that. It would spoil my tough image." When Nita said, "We care about you too," it might have sounded a bit too emotional, but Shannon didn't react, so I didn't either. Gary and Danny showed up with 2 trays of drinks, so we invited the band to join us and added more chairs. After one drink, which I gulped too quickly, Shannon asked Will to dance, and Lila joined in as well. I have no idea what my fiancé said to Will, but he looked really interested. I hoped it wasn't an invitation. Will is a charming guy, married and famous. Lila and I danced together for the first time. She moved gracefully and followed my lead like no one else. Lena grabbed me next, joking about me being a hermit living in a place without radio stations, which made me laugh. She was so fun to be around. How is she not married? Shannon was dancing with Woody now, after Will and Gary, and Katrina was dancing with Will while River entertained Lila with his moves. I turned, caught Nita's eye, and offered my hand. She smiled and walked over to me. "That was quite a speech, little girl. Where did you learn all those fancy words?" With confidence, she replied, "I graduated from the University of Texas, which is better than your small degree from Texas Technological College, or whatever you call that place in the middle of nowhere." Well, you've always been smarter than me, so I'm not surprised. It just feels odd to call a top student like you a Longhorn. Top student? I remember when you told me you didn't care what others thought because I was worth any trouble. I figured you would remember. Will thinks I was brave, but you were the best student in school, no contest. What he calls bravery was just teenage feelings. Don't kid yourself. I needed bravery too. My wealthy Mexican parents were not happy about me dating you. She smiled and added, "I'll never forget walking into prom with you. I thought the old principal would faint." My favorite was the shocked faces of the old ladies standing by the wall. They looked really uncomfortable. Don't forget the rich kids. They were surprised too. It wasn't just the old ladies and teachers. Right, but they were worried I might get close to the best student in school after prom. And you did. You used me for 2 months and then just left. What was that about? Do you want the legend or the truth? The truth, please. I cried too. I knew if I saw you again I'd want to stay, but I couldn't. You had another year of school, and it was hard to leave like that. I didn't want to watch you cry or say no if you asked me to stay. Well, there was also that trouble we got into. Will and Woody think I'm brave, but I wasn't really. You were my weakness, and I took the easy way out. She sighed. I'm mostly okay now, but talking helps. Maybe one day I will be fully okay and can move on. Thanks for being honest. I spent years thinking it was my fault. I'm really sorry for that, Nita. You were amazing and I was not so great. It was never you. It was me wanting to leave our town. My biggest regret is not telling you before I left. She sighed again. You were right. I would have begged you to stay, and if you did, you would have resented me for it. You were never meant to be anyone's follower. Just know you have a very special place in my heart, and you always will. The music has stopped, and your lovely fiancé and most of the people here are watching us, so please laugh, give me a quick kiss on the cheek, and I will head back to the table while you go comfort the girl you care about. We did exactly as she suggested and stepped apart. When I reached Shannon, she asked, "So did you sort things out, or do I need a new fiancé?" I answered sorted, wrapped my arms around her and gave her a sweet kiss that reassured her, Katrina, and River. We danced to almost every song in the last set, stopping now and then to enjoy some drinks and chat with friends. We stayed until the end, talked with the band while they packed up, and then returned to the hotel. That night, we shared a beautiful moment together, and the next morning, I woke up feeling even more in love with my sweet Shannon. River messaged us about breakfast at 8, and we were ready by 8:15. I was always amazed at how Shannon could go from sleepy to stunning in just 15 minutes, but I guess that comes with her job. I led my lovely fiancé off the elevator and took her to the coffee pot. I then turned to see where River and Katrina were sitting. To my surprise, they were at a set of tables with the owner, his family, and 2 young families with small children. There were 2 empty chairs at the end, facing the other families. I took Shannon to the seats they had saved, set down my coffee, and extended my hand. "Good morning, I'm Theo." And then I stopped. Shannon was staring at the young fathers, looking surprised. One of them took a sip of coffee, smiled at me, and said, "We weren't sure if you would come by before you left, so we came down for breakfast. Kenneth said he'd put it on your bill. We don't eat out often. It adds up." Shannon looked as surprised as Katrina and River seemed, and she said, "I'd recognize you two anywhere. You look just like Theo. Which one is George Alexander, and which is William Augustus?" They both stood, shook her hand, introduced themselves, and shared the names of their wives and children. I stood there amazed. They were better looking than me and were married to cheerful, lovely women. Each had a son and a daughter. "You're not as chatty as I remember, Theo. Does your fiancé do all the talking for you now?" Will asked with a friendly grin. He was right, and I felt a bit stuck. I needed a moment to adjust. Ignoring the adults, I went around the table, knelt by the kids, smiled, and introduced myself as Uncle Theo. I asked Will's little boy and girl how old they were. "I'm almost 5. My name is Monroe, and my daddy says I'm named after you. Ted is too," he said, pointing at Alex's little boy who looked about 2. The little girls were bright-eyed and confident, but Ted was clinging to his mom. "And what are your names, pretty girls?" I asked. The little one, who had curly blonde hair, smiled back at me and said, "I'm Katie, and I'm 2. This is my mommy. Her name is Kathy, but she doesn't want me to tell her age." I laughed with them, shook Katie's little hand, and looked up at her mom. Kathy was also a sandy blonde, dressed casually, and she looked great. She smiled at me, and I reached out to shake her hand as she stood up. "Get up and give me a hug, big brother. You probably don't remember me because I was a skinny freshman with braces when you graduated, but I've been with Will since I got my braces off and grew up, back when we were juniors." She gave me a big hug, full of warmth, and said she was so glad I finally came home. I told her it was a pleasure to see her again, and that I remembered her as Katie Ferguson. She gasped, hugged me again, and said she couldn't believe I remembered her. "Well, back then I had a good eye for seeing potential. I put you in the great future ahead category, and I was right. I'm glad Will saw it too." She laughed and said Will didn't even talk to her until she changed a lot before their junior year, and then he just wouldn't leave her alone. I stepped next to her, offered my hand to her husband, and pulled him up when he took it. I hugged him tightly and said, "It's so good to see you, brother, and your wife and kids are wonderful. You did so well." He hugged me back and said he was proud of his wife and children, and of the life they built here in Cowtown. We let go of each other, and he smiled, saying, "Still have the old 357, big brother." When I found it by my bed and saw your truck was gone, I knew it was my turn to take charge, and I took that seriously. I was about to ask him how things went after I left when I felt a little tug on my shorts. I looked down and saw the cutest blue-eyed girl I had seen in a while. She was younger, but would be adorable in a few years. I quickly knelt and held out my hand to her. "I'm your Uncle Theo, sweetheart. You must be my brother Alex's oldest child. What's your name?" "You called me Angel, but my name is Angela. I'm the same age as Monroe, who we all call Bubba. My mom is Brooke and my brother is Ted, but he's shy, so he's hiding behind her. Could I get a hug from you, Angel? It would really make me happy." She was not scared at all. She giggled and gave me the sweetest hug I'd ever gotten. I could have held her forever, but I needed to meet Brooke and my little brother, who was in 8th grade when I left. I thanked Angela, which made her laugh again, and then I stood up. I looked at my other sister-in-law, bent slightly, and said, "As you probably know, I'm Theodore Monroe Carr, and it's nice to meet you, Brooke." She looked familiar, but I was sure I didn't know her. She was in junior high when I left, and the only kid I really paid attention to back then was Alex, who was a good football player. She smiled knowingly and said, "Are you trying to remember me? I doubt you do, but you might know my older sister, Dee. You dated her for a bit, and I saw you when you came to our house to pick her up." "You're Dee Hill's little sister? Wow, yes, you look a lot like her. Maybe even a little prettier." She smiled and said, "She always said you could charm anyone, and now I see what she meant. But thank you. Even if I don't think it's true, she won all college beauty at Texas Lutheran twice. Did you go to TLU too? If you did, you probably won all college beauty as well." She got up from her chair, showing a small baby bump, and gave me a hug. "I hope you stick around. You really boost my confidence." I held her at arm's length, looked her over, and said, "You're not fat. There isn't anything out of place. You have that glow that only pregnant women get, so you look amazing." She laughed, rubbed her tummy, and shook her head. "Okay, stop flattering my wife. Just like when we were kids, you'd distract me and then take my toast." Brooke stepped aside, knowing what was coming next. "Come over here and say that, you silly goose, always trying to trick Mom and getting out of chores that I had to do for you." G.A., as I used to call him, stepped past his wife, made a fake punch, and wrapped his arms around me. "I missed you so much, big brother, and it wasn't just the chores I got you to do, it was having you there to take care of us, making sure we ate, and knowing we could count on you if things got tough. Will and I knew you had to go, but we missed you every day and night, I promise." I felt tears welling up in my eyes as I held him and gently swayed back and forth. I truly missed them, but I had to do what I thought was right, so I prayed for them every day. It seems my prayers were answered. Will came over and joined us. We made space, and the 3 Carr brothers shared a warm group hug that brought tears to our eyes. So much feeling filled that simple hug, and it seemed to wash away years of fear and worries. Our 3 wives wrapped their arms around their husbands from behind, and the kids hugged our legs. Angela chose to hug mine, which nearly brought me to tears. Ken said loudly, "I knew this would either end in a group hug or a fight, and I'm glad it's a hug. We have a special Sunday meal in the dining room at 11, and I want to see all of you there. We're serving roast beef with gravy, potatoes, and green beans, or roasted turkey with cornbread stuffing and gravy, plus some amazing rolls. While you wait, you can grab a breakfast plate and use that conference room over there. It has a big table for 12, and the kids can play in the fenced playground outside. Moms, you'll be able to see them from the conference room, so relax and catch up. It's been a long time." As we began to sit down, Will grinned and said, "You might not know this, but we were there last night when Will Callahan talked about you and sang that song. We work with Bobby Flores on construction jobs, and he let us know when to come. It was special to hear a hit song written about our brother." G.A. Alex added, "Yeah, but he kind of skipped over the reason you left. By the way, the new district attorney knew you from school and said to tell you that the time limit for any action on that incident has passed. Plus, those 2 deputies are in prison for 20 more years, so you can come back without worry." "Thanks, bro. I have a criminal justice degree with a minor in legal studies from Texas Tech. I didn't plan to go to law school. I just want to understand the law better so River and I aren't taken advantage of in the contracts we deal with. Anyway, I knew the time limit had passed. Katrina told me the two deputies I dealt with are no longer with the sheriff's department, so I wasn't too concerned. I thought everyone would remember me as the angry kid I was in school, which made me hesitate to come back. Really, though, I was worried about what might have happened to you two after I left. Now I see you with your wonderful families, and I regret not coming home sooner. Honestly, as much as we missed you, you did us a favor. Without you, we had to grow up quickly, and we did. The first time the old man came in angry and drunk, I pulled my gun and warned him that the same rules applied whether you were there or not. I told him that if he hurt any of us or treated us poorly, I would defend myself. So if Dad didn't cause any more trouble and you all had these wonderful grandchildren, did Mom change at all? Everyone looked a bit sad, and Alex said, "Not really. She's still struggling with alcohol and often seems out of it. Sometimes she pays attention to the kids, but not always. Honestly, if our father hadn't started to clean up and care for her, she might not be with us anymore, or she might be in a care facility. Maybe that would be best." Wanting to steer the conversation away from our complicated family, Brooke cheerfully asked, "Did you ever wonder how the reunion committee found you?" "I actually did. How did that happen?" "Alex hired a worker who listed Pitaya Ventures in New Mexico as his job for the past few years. Your brothers remembered how you would go pick pitayas every May, prepare them like strawberries, and serve them for dessert. So, Alex asked Renee for the name of the person he worked for. He said River hired him, but his crew worked under a guy named Theo. We looked online and found your company along with a few newspaper articles about you. We saw that you had been married to a doctor but divorced after some trouble with a senator's son. Then we found out about the big contracts you got from the state to clean up old wells. The state's office shared contact details, so I called the business number and Katrina picked up. She told me any mail sent to the company would reach you. We chatted a bit and she promised to help convince you to come to the reunion. Nita told me you had paid and would be coming. Kathy and I checked in with Katrina occasionally, and a few months ago, Shannon answered when we called. We spoke for a while. She said you had changed your mind, but she would keep trying. 2 weeks ago, she called to say she had booked rooms for you here, and we started making plans with your brothers. Ken called when you checked in, and then I saw your nice Denali drive down our road, turn around, and head back to town. Ken said that was you, so I told your brothers. We knew your reservations lasted until Tuesday and were hopeful you'd stop by today, but after seeing you last night, your brothers got a bit impatient. So here we are. Well, thank you for being creative and persistent. I should have reached out years ago, but I was just too angry and disappointed to do it. I felt sure Will could handle Dad. He was already bigger and stronger than I was when I faced Dad the first time, and Dad wasn't as tough as he used to be. From the trucks we saw earlier, it looks like you and Alex run a dirt work company, and Will and Kathy have an electrical business. How did you start those? We both worked for Dad, and like you, we had to learn to fix the old machines to keep them running, Alex said. I was good at operating equipment. When work got slow, Will used to help Old Man Jimenez, the electrician. Will was good with electricity and took some classes in high school. Then he did some online courses, and right after he turned 18, he earned his first credentials. He bought Mr. J's business when he was 19, and I started my business right after I graduated. You might have noticed that both our businesses have car in the name. After you left town, we thought it might be risky to use it. But with the Smithermans gone, it has become a sign of bravery and strength. We're not too proud of our parents, but we're brothers, and we won't back down. Brooke shifted the topic. Kathy told you that she and Will were high school sweethearts and got married at the courthouse right after they turned 18. Our story is pretty similar. We got married when I turned 18 and we had Angela, as you call her, 7 months later. Honestly, we didn't plan it, but it turned out to be the best surprise ever, and we're hoping for child number 3 of 4. We found out it's another boy, so maybe we can have another girl before I'm done having kids. Don't look at us, Kathy said when I raised an eyebrow. We're happy with our 2 kids, but maybe someday we'll consider having another. Now let's talk about you and your fiancé. Don't give me that look. That's what Katrina called her when she sent us her picture. When and where are you getting married, and where will you live? Shannon shot Katrina a teasing glance and then laughed. I could tease you about that, but honestly, it's not the first time I've been called something like that. In fact, I was Miss December in 2 calendars for Texas Tech. Then she turned to me, saying, "Don't worry, I just posed in one of my cheerleader outfits, but I won't say which one." Anyway, we're getting married in my hometown of Highland Park, the one in Dallas, not Amarillo, on October 22nd. Your invitations are in my suitcase at the hotel. I've booked rooms for you and your kids at the wedding hotel, and we'd love to fly you from San Antonio to Dallas Love Field. Love is much closer to the hotel and church than DFW. Mom and Dad let you use their Suburban, so you won't need to rent anything. We have a daycare team ready to look after the kids during the reception if you want, so that's one less worry. And it's still safe for you to travel then, right, Brooke? Brooke smiled, nodded, and said she was excited about going. The talk changed from one topic to another until River offered to share some work opportunities, since we work with companies active in the Eagle Ford. Will shook his head and said, "Not unless you can send some help our way first. Seems like you big guys in the Permian are paying too much." Shannon laughed and replied, "You can't pay too much for people living in Orla and working in Mentone or the rough areas of New Mexico, but yes, we pay well. Pitaya Ventures has a great HR department in oil services. Maybe you could ask them for help. Interested?" "Absolutely," they said together. "Who do we need to contact?" Will asked. Shannon pointed to Katrina and herself and chuckled again. "We'll get your details before we leave and exchange ours. I hope you don't mind working with young men or women fresh from trade schools, because we have some good ones around here. They do need real-world training, but once Theo gets them ready, he's always happy with their work." Kenneth opened the door and said, "The dining room opens in 10 minutes, so come on and get seated before the lines get long." We all stood up, and the mothers were about to call the kids when Kenneth casually asked River, "Are you still planning to head northwest on Tuesday morning?" River looked at me with a shrug, so I answered, "That's the plan. Why?" "Too bad. I got an invitation a few minutes ago that includes the Carboys and whoever they want to bring. It doesn't happen often, and even less when outsiders like us are invited to a songwriters round in Will's barn. Usually it's just his group, Tim and Sierra, and some of his and Woody's friends. It's pretty cool, though, having songwriters come from all over Texas, along with a few from Nashville or LA. They gather around the fire pit, share stories, and try out new songs. I wish you weren't going home." I looked at my excited fiancée, River, Katrina, and my brothers and sisters-in-law and told Ken, "Plans can change, bud. I want to see our parents, show these folks around, and maybe enjoy a drink at Billy Goat, so staying to hear the songwriters is just another good reason to be here a bit longer. When is this event?" "Wednesday night at 6:30. Burgers, brats, wieners, buns, and condiments will be provided. Bring your own drinks." It went on until no one wanted to sing anymore, so sometimes we even had hot dogs for breakfast. Shannon clapped her hands with joy and exclaimed, "I'm a rich princess from Highland Park who's in a sorority at Texas Tech, and I've had more fun on this trip than I ever thought possible. TMC, you're going to be so glad you came here when I'm done with you tonight." Everyone in the room laughed, but I kept a straight face and said, "It would be hard to make me happier than I am now, but feel free to try." More laughter followed, and then Kathy chimed in, "You two better behave. We're getting the kids, and little ears hear everything." Shannon chose turkey and dressing. I picked roast beef, and we shared enough bites to agree that both were delicious. Our extended family decided that Sunday afternoon was a great time to visit our old home. We took some lunch specials and a pecan pie as gifts, and followed Alex and Will there. I can't say I felt warm feelings when I stepped onto the old porch, or when I walked in with my brothers and their families. Seeing my frail-looking mom under a blanket on the worn couch was hard, as was seeing my dad, who looked so thin sitting in his chair with the remote. In 10 years, Will and Alex had grown up and started families, but my parents seemed to have aged decades, looking like they hadn't eaten much either. Mom seemed much older than her 50 years, and Dad looked like a shadow of the strong man I remembered. Shannon's reaction turned from shock to caring, but my heart felt distant. They had made their choices. Mom managed a smile for her grandchildren as they surrounded her, and gave a nod to her younger sons. When her eyes found mine, there was no sign of recognition for Katrina, River, or Shannon, but she looked at me with curiosity. "Mom, don't you remember Theo, your oldest son?" Will asked, gently nudging me towards her. She seemed confused for a moment and then asked, Theo, is that you? It is, Mom. I've been away for a while, but it's good to see you. This is my fiancée, Shannon Barnes, and these are Katrina and River Payton, my colleagues, I said as I walked closer. She followed my words, glanced at everyone I mentioned, then turned back to Angela, who was beside her, and gave her a gentle kiss. Mom patted the young girl and looked around the room again, looking more puzzled than happy. Seeing that not much had changed except for how much older she had become, I brought my group over to my dad's chair and reintroduced them. He nodded, but didn't try to get up, shake hands, or introduce himself. He just gave me a cold stare and said, "Well, at least you're not in prison like I thought. You never did much good, but beating up on 2 officers and then running off was pretty low, even for you." He always knew how to get under my skin, and I replied, "Actually, it's not me who has been in trouble, it's those 2 deputies. Ever wonder why I bothered with them?" Kathy called out loudly, "Kids, come on!" She gathered the children and sent them outside before coming back to listen. "I can't remember why, other than you've always been tough," the old man said. "It's because I saw them stop a car with a boy and a girl on Kendall Lane. My girlfriend and I were parked about 30 yards away so we could see and hear everything. Barry Smitherman took the keys from the boy, opened the trunk, and threw a bag in. Then he pulled it out and shouted that he found some marijuana and a bottle of vodka. He and Clausen made the kids get out of the car, lean against it, and search them. The girl, Mindy Ramirez, was already crying. She was 15, and Rob Garcia was 16. It was their first date, and he had just gotten his license. The first thing Smitherman said was, 'Well, you 2 are in trouble now. We'll take you to town and throw you in jail, and the judge might set your bail on Monday. It will be high since this is enough to charge you with selling, so you might be facing 510 years. I was with Nita Garcia that night, and Robbie is her younger brother. She was about to lose it, but I told her we couldn't help them if the officers saw us. If they did, they would take the kids away and charge them, no matter if they did anything wrong or not. Smitherman was behind Rob, and Clausen was behind Mindy with his hands on her shoulders. There is a way out of this if you want to avoid jail over the weekend and not spend years for dealing drugs. Do you want to know what it is?" Mindy was crying so much she couldn't respond, but Rob asked what they needed to do between sobs. "You just have to follow our instructions, and we'll show you how to deal with it, and then you can go on your way." Mindy was in shock upon hearing that, and Rob was shaking his head and pleading. Clausen shouted at Mindy and told her to be quiet or else. When she continued to cry, he pushed her head against the door. Smitherman took out his gun and pressed it against Robbie's face, telling him to take off his clothes or else. I saw that the safety was on, so I moved behind him and hit him hard in the side. He fell, and the gun flew away. I ran around to face Clausen, who was searching for his gun in a pile of clothes on the ground. I did hurt him a lot, and I admit it, but Nita also kicked Smitherman, and Clausen got hurt because Robbie and Mindy kicked him while he was on the ground. That's why I reacted strongly against 2 deputies. I wish I could have done that every time they mistreated innocent kids. The old man scoffed and said, "It wasn't your problem. You should have stayed out of it. They were just trouble." I closed my eyes, shook my head, and said, "You have no decency at all." I turned and left the room with others following. "Our house," Kathy insisted. River drove the car while I walked beside Shannon, letting my anger out. We passed Will's gate, then Alex's, and walked another half-mile in the hot sand until I stopped, swore for a moment, sighed, then turned to Shannon and apologized. "I get it, Theo. I really do," she replied. "I knew how you felt, but I wasn't ready for that. I wanted to yell at your old man for what he said about you and the kids you helped. My only problem is walking this far in this heat. My sandals won't survive." The look of disgust on her face was too funny, and it made me laugh despite my anger. I picked her up and carried her piggyback all the way to Will and Kathy's house while she laughed joyfully. The Carr boys and their families met to discuss a plan. I had thought about buying my parents a new home, but it was clear that wasn't going to work. We decided on a care facility on the edge of town, overlooking the river. It might require a court order, but it was obvious they needed help, and they weren't eating enough, even with food that my brothers and their wives provided. I agreed to pay for 1 year in the facility, while my brothers would handle any medical costs and other needs. They quickly agreed, since both were covered by Alex's insurance anyway. We would do the paperwork at the facility tomorrow, and then the women would convince them to make the move. If they hesitated, we would start the process to get a visit from Human Services. They may not have been great parents, but they would need to find another way to deal with their issues as they grew older. My lovely nieces and nephews were asleep on the bunk beds in Will's home, and my caring sisters-in-law thought their husbands needed a rest too, as they were preparing hot dogs for the kids in a little while. With a busy day ahead, I urged my family to hop in the Denali so I could show them around beautiful Cowtown and its surroundings. Everyone else seemed to favor the idea of a nap, but I was too energetic, so they piled in with me driving and off we went. Our father, William Alexander Carr, was different from the rest of the Carr family. We came from a long line of pioneers who arrived in the U.S. before 1770. They fought in the Revolutionary War, became successful farmers, ranchers, and business people, and held positions in both state and national governments. Our great-great-grandfather even served in Andrew Jackson's cabinet before moving to Texas with his 8 children, so we weren't always looked down upon. In fact, several of the oldest brick buildings in Cowtown were built by our 3rd great-grandfather and his brother. They helped create the first Methodist church, Masonic lodge, and public schools. And our great-great-grandfather was the county judge for many years. Even 10 years after he retired, the town honored him by closing for his funeral. Sadly, my great-grandfather died young, leaving only my grandfather, who was raised by his mother, and a stepfather who didn't want that responsibility. He was quite mean, and that attitude affected his stepson. A Smitherman once scoffed, "The blood grows weaker and weaker in your family, Carr, and you're the weakest." He changed his mind after waking up, injured, but that led to my first time in jail at just 13. His nose probably still hurts, but it's straighter now after surgeries. As I parked in front of the Carr Mercantile, I talked about my family history, mentioning the United Methodist Church, the Masonic Hall, and the old grammar school, now a museum. The Carrs were key players in creating all of those places, and yet I felt disappointed that this legacy seemed reduced to my father, William Alexander. Katrina quickly corrected me. "No, it doesn't stop there. It continues with William Monroe and his children, George Alexander and his family, and you and whatever kids you have. As you said, your dad is different, but you and your brothers are carrying on your great-great-grandfather's legacy and doing great things." As much as I think highly of my brothers, I believe that by the time they turn 30, they will be in charge here. Katrina and River helped lift my spirits. They wanted to visit Billy Goat Hill, Vincent's Crossing, and other places they had heard about in songs and in stories I had told. It's a bit sad that I only talked about home when I had a drink in me, and I don't drink very often. Maybe just after I filed for divorce. Looking back, I realize now that my feelings for Julie were never as strong as my feelings for the one sitting next to me. Just like me, she had to specially order the Denali with a front bench seat so we could sit together while traveling. Billy Goat Hill and Nanny Goat across the road didn't look like much in the daylight. I promised to bring them back at night to see the town's lights and the beautiful stars. They may not be as striking as those in West Texas, which has low humidity and almost no light pollution, but they are still lovely compared to the busier parts of Texas. Vincent's Crossing was gated and locked. The road was now marked privately maintained. The tall fences I saw meant the owners did not want people riding near their land or stopping on the old bridge. I felt disappointment. The families who once owned this land welcomed us and let us swim and cook as long as we cleaned up afterward. Thanks to the oil and gas from the Eagle Ford Shale, many areas in the county had improved, especially the streets and roads. The new football and track stadium with its shiny metal seats and turf field didn't have the charm of the old wooden stands where we used to play, though I wished we had been without the grass burrs back then. We rode out to an old dam that local landowners had worked together to build for irrigation over 100 years ago. This was part of the Winter Garden, which produced a lot of the vegetables and melons eaten in Texas during the early 1900s. A wealthy family from San Antonio bought the farms and let the dam wash away, so now there was no dam, no lake, and no place for recreation. They didn't want anyone fishing or swimming in their river, so they took away what made those activities possible. It's easy to see why I feel frustrated with the privileged. The local government accepted payments to stay quiet, showing little concern. The state was even less interested, despite the river being state property. It would be interesting to see how things would change now that Cow County has new officials. Not many people knew that the landowners had given the dam site and an acre on each side to the county in exchange for keeping it up. I wonder what would happen if the county got money to fix the dam. We arrived back at the hotel just before dark after a long and emotional day. Honestly, I was very tired, and my fiancé had fallen asleep on my shoulder during the drive back. The back seat was quiet, but I could hear some soft talking from the radio I had turned on for the trip. After I parked, but before I woke my fiancé, River quietly said, "After the welcome you received when we first got here and from your brothers, we couldn't understand why you were hesitant to come back. Now we see why. You have many happy memories here, but also some sad ones and a tough situation with your parents. If the family that used to run this place was still in charge, it would likely be unbearable. But now, you have good friends here. You've made your mark on the town and your school. Your brothers and their families are doing well, and you are doing great in your work. Add in the wonderful young woman by your side, and there is nothing here that can hurt you. Take care of what you need to do tomorrow. Enjoy the music and good company on Wednesday night, and we'll head home Thursday. Your connection with your hometown needs some time, but one thing must be addressed before we leave. Your brothers need to support you at your wedding. Do whatever it takes to make that happen." Both my fiancé and I were very tired. We had a gentle shower together and went to sleep peacefully. Breakfast was good, and our conversation was even better, which helped me to visit Will and Kathy without as much worry as I had expected. We loaded 2 cars, left the kids with their favorite babysitter, and looked around the assisted living facility that offers advanced care. I was impressed, as were my brothers. River and Katrina asked questions about caring for elderly people and received answers to things we might not have thought to ask. I made a deposit, and they offered me a nice discount if I paid for the year ahead of time, just as I had hoped. Alex and Will were managing the medical and psychological exams needed, and the girls came up with a plan to encourage our parents to give it a try. In the end, the idea of free meals and living in a new home with new furniture was enough to get Dad to agree to check it out. Mom seemed lost in her thoughts, so she just got into the car and went with them. The 3 Carr brothers and River looked through the house and decided there wasn't much to take, unless it really meant something to our parents. We chose a few framed photos, 3 albums of old pictures, and their medications. Everything else would be replaced, since their clothes and shoes were worn out and smelled bad. The doctor said they were dehydrated and not getting enough food, but otherwise they were in decent shape. The news about their mental health wasn't as good, but the staff psychologist believed a psychiatrist could help them with the right medication and support. That was the first moment I thought someone at the facility wasn't being completely honest, but she seemed genuine. They got to see the place, had a snack in the cafeteria, and checked out their new living areas. Mom didn't want to go home. Dad wanted to eat before heading back. Sadly, their house wouldn't be ready until tomorrow, so we took them out for dinner. We packed some meals to take home for today and tomorrow, then drove them back. Once we got inside, Mom looked sad, and Dad sank into his chair staring at the TV. Maybe those 3 meals, new clothes and shoes, medical care, and a new home would actually make a big difference. Perhaps the psychiatrist would see that Dad had issues he could work on, rather than just being grumpy. The girls went to the mall in Laredo to shop for clothes for both of them, and we looked online at Alex's to see if we could sell some old toys and trucks he had lying around that still worked. The rest we could sell for parts. River took some time to browse items in the gallery for the upcoming Ritchie Brothers auction. We needed different types of equipment and trucks for the new teams we would soon employ, and he found several items to bid on. Alex and Will were new to online auctions, so River showed them how it all worked. The women returned around 9 p.m. with more clothes than our parents had ever owned, plus a few things they picked out for themselves. The kids were fed and in bed, and we were relaxing on Alex's deck with some drinks, but we were all tired, so we headed back to the hotel while Will and Kathy went home. On Tuesday, over coffee, I called some of my groomsmen to see if they would be okay moving a little to support my brothers. The first 2 I spoke with were excited, but wanted to make sure they would be invited to the party and the rehearsal dinner. I promised they would be invited to the rehearsal dinner, But I forgot to mention there would be no bachelor party, even one as boring as the last. As soon as I saw them, I asked my brothers to be groomsmen, and they agreed, thinking they could get nice suits since they didn't have any. I said we would help with that and told them to send us their sizes. Then we went to pick up our parents. Even if they felt sad about leaving their home for the last time, they didn't show it. When we arrived, Mom went through her closet and looked at her new clothes. She seemed happy and even hummed as someone prepared a nice bath for her and laid out a new outfit. Dad found some snacks, looked at his clothes, and agreed to shower and put on something new, although he complained about having to wait before lunch. Alex had told him it was important, and it worked. In some ways, our father had become a bit like a child. He needed convincing to do certain things, no matter how much it cost. Their parents were all settled in by 11. The kind nurse and technician assigned to them were busy helping them get used to the place. Rosa, the nurse, informed us that lunch was coming soon so we could leave, and she assured us that she and Clara would take good care of our parents. After chatting in the parking lot, the Carr brothers and their wives decided we should try Sista's, the best Tex-Mex restaurant in town, for lunch. There had been a lot of worry since the decision to move our parents was made, but now that was gone. As River said, "You had no choice, really, and I think this will turn out to be the best thing for both of them." That made everyone feel good about the situation, and lunch was not just tasty, it felt like a celebration. It was nice when every other person who came in stopped by to say hello, even if they weren't related to our gathering. I left Sista's feeling uplifted by how well the morning had gone, enjoying the company of Alex and Brooke, Will and Kathy, and even people I hadn't seen in a decade who came over to say it was nice to see me again. Of course, any table with Katrina, Shannon, Kathy, and Brooke would attract attention, but the men there were friendly too. Shannon mentioned she recognized some of the company logos on shirts, but not all. I didn't know either, so we asked Alex. He explained that many early oil explorations were done by smaller companies before the big ones like EOG and Chesapeake came along, and those smaller companies still had some land leased. Will added that EOG never stopped drilling, trying longer drills in the dense shale. None of the laterals were as long as 3 miles, like in the Permian Basin, River said, but they were becoming longer and closer together as more was learned about the limits of the area known as the EFS. Alex joked that Chesapeake bought the mineral rights on the Carr family land and was managing it quite well for 400 acres. Chesapeake did not have as many large leases as EOG and some early players like Escondido, but they were inventive. In some areas, like ours, they had drilled curved laterals using a mix of pipes that drew laughs from the more traditional drilling companies until they started producing well like other shale wells. River mentioned that Chesapeake was big in the gas fields near El Paso, but their move to drill for both gas and oil was a new challenge for them. They had their wet wells for sale, deciding to return to their main focus. However, there was a good chance they would look into the Buda Formation below the EFS since it was known to have gas. The difficulty was that much of it is sour gas, which can be harmful, so the rules for production are stricter. For now, any gas in the Buda Formation will stay on hold for another time. Just like much of the petroleum reserves in the U.S. refineries can't handle more production, and only one new refinery has been built in Texas, the state that produces most of the country's petroleum despite the growing demand. Sometimes I wonder why this is, but then I remember how much the oil companies spend to explore, drill, produce, transport, refine, and sell gasoline and gas. They need to make a reasonable profit. The price hikes during holidays and the summer travel season make me frustrated, and the record profits every quarter can be hard to understand. But our company is doing well by cleaning up their messes and providing services for better exploration, production, and transportation. Complaining about their profits while trying to do the same can seem unfair, but that's just business in the oil industry. During lunch, our conversation led Alex to take us for a ride down one of the most productive roads, and we were impressed by the number of rigs working. With enough pipelines and refineries within 110 miles in Corpus Christi, and some even closer, the higher costs of EFS production were somewhat balanced by the nearby refineries and tankers that transport refined gasoline and diesel to other U.S. ports and abroad. At 3:30, the wives called to let us know there was a swim party at the hotel and that we were needed as lifeguards. so we headed back. Anything else we should know? River asked. Actually, she hinted we'd be really pleased when the bids come out. She suggested we start getting ready now so we're prepared when the contracts are awarded. That's how I understood it, right, intern? Pretty close. She was a bit more subtle, but that's basically what she said, Shannon confirmed. Good. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, River said. Shannon, are you willing to do whatever it takes if that's what she expects? Shannon smiled. Oh, absolutely. If it comes to that, I'll make sure we get those contracts. Everyone watched her closely, trying to figure out if she was serious or just joking. After a long pause, a small grin finally appeared on her face. Okay, you had me there for a minute. River laughed. Remind me not to invite you to poker night. Then River looked at me, his tone becoming more serious. Now, partner, what's on your mind? I took a deep breath before speaking. Shannon, you remember that old beat-up trailer we saw last night? Well, imagine something even worse. A broken-down shack surrounded by rusty trucks. That was my family's home. I paused, the memories weighing on me. My dad had a problem with alcohol. He took it out on us, on my mom, me, and sometimes my younger brothers. I went to school a lot with bruises, but no one ever stepped in to help. Not the school staff, not anyone. The sheriff? He was part of the family that ran everything in our town, and they didn't care about people like us. I took another deep breath to steady myself. When I was 12, I tried to report my dad, but the sheriff told me to stop causing trouble. The beatings didn't stop, but I stopped being afraid. By the time I was 14, I was ready to stand up to him. One night, when he was drunk, I told him things were going to change. The room was silent as I finished, everyone understanding the weight of what I had just shared. I must have done a good job, judging by her sounds of enjoyment and the overwhelming excitement we shared. Luckily, she had some wet wipes in the car, which we used to clean ourselves in the seat. She also had some body spray in her bag to help with the smell. It was great that she was prepared because we only got about 10 minutes to look at the stars while lying on the hood before a group of trucks and SUVs came around us. They brought drinks, energy, a metal fire pit with wood, folding chairs, and a speaker. There were many friendly introductions led by Bobby Flores, and we quickly found ourselves in another welcome home celebration. It was still warm outside, but a fire is a must for enjoying drinks outdoors, at least in South and West Texas. The large group had been there for about an hour, and the chatter grew louder along with the music from the speaker. Since they were on Billy Goat Hill and Theo hadn't listened to much of that type of music, it became the main focus, along with conversations about the lyrics. Because no one was paying much attention to what was happening around them, few people used the old road from town. The new road was nearby, and the local police hardly bothered the gatherings on the hill. So everyone was surprised when 3 cars pulled up and turned off onto the rocky hillside. The first to get out were Sierra and Tim. Just as everyone was greeting each other, the second vehicle stopped, opened its doors, and Woody and his wife, a local girl, stepped out. Woody carried a guitar, which got a big cheer. The third vehicle brought Lena, Lila, and Will, all with guitars, plus a few tambourines and harmonicas. The crowd went wild. Woody then asked the crowd, "Do you know how loud you are? People in town are probably closing their windows to block out the noise, and we live less than a mile away. So since you can't go to sleep, you might as well join us. It's been a while since we had a fun music night here, so we brought some instruments, but we need to turn off the speaker." That was an easy choice, so the music from the speaker stopped, which likely made the neighbors happy if there were any nearby. The rules for the music night were simple. If a singer tapped their chest, they were singing. If they pointed to someone, everyone had to join in. So far, everyone had been singing along to popular songs until Will tapped his chest, strummed his guitar, and said, "I just finished this song, although I might change it in the coming weeks." The working title is "Can Time and Beauty Tame the Beast?" But that's too long for a title, so who knows what the title will become. Anyway, give it a listen and provide some feedback after we finish. Will's deep Johnny Cash voice mixed with Lila and Lena's celestial highs and pure vocal emotions created a striking contrast, complemented by lyrics that fluctuated throughout the song. Midway through, Shannon turned her gaze to me and whispered, "So I'm Beauty, and you're the Beast?" I guess so. The reference to the angry young man in the last verse confirmed it for everyone, and the whooping, hollering, and pounding on Theo's back and shoulders reinforced their appreciation. Shannon was spared the physical excitement, but received plenty of friendly gestures from everyone around. Will sat with a sardonic grin until things quieted down and asked, "So, it seems you liked it. Any thoughts on improving it?" There were no immediate suggestions, though Shannon mentioned she had a few ideas to share tomorrow. About 20 songs later, Woody closed the show with an invitation. "We need to get back, and you need to get home. We're hosting a songwriters round tomorrow night, and you're all invited. Be there by 7 and BYOB. It took 15 minutes for the crowd to disperse, leaving Shannon and me staring at the fire still flickering in the ring. She got her phone from her pocket, found something to play, laid her phone on the hood, and gave me that playful look I know signifies that the fun is about to start. When the music began, she joined in, initially just dancing around the fire, its flickering flames casting a warm glow. Then she stood across the fire, moving gracefully, with the moonlight adding to the scene. As she danced, her outfit playfully swayed, drawing my attention. I wanted to join her, but she seemed to be fully engrossed in her performance, and I simply watched, captivated. She spun, looked over her shoulder at me, and danced, showcasing her joyful energy. I was mesmerized by the moment, feeling the electricity in the air. As the dance continued, I appreciated the carefree spirit of the evening, feeling the warmth of the fire and the connection between us. I waved for her to come closer, but she stayed on the other side of the pit, swaying playfully and teasing me. When I couldn't take it anymore, she giggled and said, "Catch me if you can." I started to move around the pit to my right. She dashed left, jumped into the Denali, and opened the back door. I picked up her clothes from the ground and followed her inside, only to find her in a playful position, clearly enjoying herself. As I knelt down, she welcomed me with enthusiasm. This wasn't just affection. It felt very raw and wild, like two animals. Her excitement echoed in the night. She wrapped her legs around me and whispered sweet words, holding me tightly. Her giggle told me that my fiancé had returned, and the playful mood softened. She joked about needing to clean her new Denali before anyone could ride in it, especially the back seat. We used the wet wipes to tidy up and cleaned the seat. I checked the fire to make sure it was safe before we headed back to the motel. The next morning, we enjoyed a hearty breakfast, then rushed to the auto parts store for deodorant and leather cleaner. As she leaned out the open door, her presence caught the attention of some passing drivers, but she was focused on cleaning her graduation gift. She wore a smile now and then, showing she noticed the attention. I walked around to see how she was doing and let out a whistle of appreciation. She stood confidently, looking great in her shorts that showed off her legs. She certainly drew attention. When I came back to my side, she looked up and said, "We need to finish this job soon and head back to the room, or we'll lose track of time. Let's get this done." I playfully called her an exhibitionist, and she agreed, saying it was just part of who she was. She urged me to hurry up so we could wrap things up. We made it back to our room in no time. An hour later, we found River and Katrina with Ken. Katrina playfully said, "We've been waiting since you both got back, but it looked like you were on a mission. Are you feeling better now?" She rested her head on my chest, and I just smiled. They laughed, stood up, and walked to the SUV with us. "Wow, this new car smells really nice," Katrina commented, and River joked he had never smelled a better air freshener. River blushed, but I just shook my head, knowing he was just being funny, and I agreed. It was going to be a very warm day, with temperatures around 95 degrees. My brothers and their wives took another day off to show us around. River was dressed in casual shorts and a t-shirt, while my brothers and I wore jogging shorts and t-shirts as well. The four women wore short shorts and comfy tops that didn't require extra support. Their playful movements were a little distracting. In Cowtown, known for its hot weather, people often dressed lightly, and Katrina and Shannon fit right in. In their outfits, Katrina stood out as my favorite of the group, and my sisters-in-law were in their 20s, looking great. We were traveling in a passenger van Alex bought for his growing family, which he also used for work. He was driving, and Will was guiding us, so while sitting next to Shannon, I could enjoy the view, just like River was doing from the back seat. Kathy sat in the front jump seat next to me, and Brooke was beside River. I have to say, my brothers picked well. The baby due in a few months would be just fine. Kathy posed a bit under my gaze, and Brooke showed off her legs and smile. Shannon nudged me a few times, and Katrina laughed at us, knowing we were all just having fun. My distraction kept me from noticing when we turned onto a paved road until Will asked, "Do you remember this place?" A tight feeling hit me when I saw Smitherman Industries. To me, it stood for the struggles the workers faced under the Smithermans. Those who worked there often had long hours, low pay, and tough conditions, which could affect their families and leave them in a tough spot. Before you step out, take a look at the sign up front. After we took down the Smitherman sign, Car Dirt Works set this one up, and Car Electric made sure it lit up. It's an interesting sign, but what it stands for makes it even better. This place is owned by a group of investors from here and other places, including San Antonio, where the company is based. 2 new small tech companies have opened along the River Road. All 3 companies offer good pay and benefits, similar to those in the cities. With the lasting jobs from the Eagle Ford project, Cowtown is almost fully employed now. It's quite different from when you last saw it. Many people think the Smitherman family's troubles started because of Will's songs, but your stand against them and how you stood up to them before you left are still talked about. People often chant like TMC when they remember the start of the rebellion. This place still feels strange, but the new sign looks much better than the old one. Please show me the other work sites and the new clinic I've heard so much about. They did, and the new shiny building stood out next to the historic Front Street, which has old brick buildings from the late 1800s and sidewalks that still have rings for tying up horses. Some of these buildings were in bad shape when I left, but as the community became more prosperous, they were fixed up and now proudly stand as historic sites. Seeing these changes, along with the nice cars and trucks everywhere, made me really happy. I never imagined Cowtown could look like this. From downtown, Alex drove into the nicer neighborhood where the Smithermans and their friends lived. The yards of the dozen houses still looked nice, but were not as perfectly kept as before when they had gardeners. The homes still looked good, but you could see children's toys and swings in the yards now, making the area feel friendlier. The Smitherman mansion, built by the grandparents, was now owned by a tech entrepreneur who had moved his business here. Will mentioned he made his wealth from video games before he moved into creating software for businesses and government. His office is full of bright, creative people who help the community grow. The Cowtown cars are friends with Richie, the owner, and some of his team. Alex stopped at a taco stand in a small food truck park near an old bar by the river, and we each picked the tacos we wanted. It was pretty warm, but there was a nice breeze, so we sat at a couple of tables with umbrellas. My carne asada tacos were delicious, and Shannon's fajita tacos were great too. We even swapped some. She insisted they were the same, but I showed her the difference in the meat. The old river park, which had been forgotten during the Smitherman years, has been brought back to life. It now has BBQ pits, grills, covered tables, and easy access to the river for fishing. Swimming isn't allowed because the river has different conditions, some of which can be fast-moving or stagnant and unsafe. Kathy jumped in, saying it was okay because there was an indoor-outdoor pool at the park about a mile away. It seemed like a nice place to raise a family, and my brothers were happy here. Who would have thought? After a quick nap and a shower, we got ready for the songwriters event at Will's house. It was still warm, but I found some nice jeans and a blue polo shirt on the bed after my shower. I changed my mind and picked a colorful shirt with Texas peppers on it instead, went for some comfy shorts, and put on my best athletic shoes. Kathy looked at me first with disapproval, then seemed to think for a moment before nodding her approval. I look good in jeans, but I think my legs get more attention in shorts. The shirt shows off my shoulders, too. I felt I looked nice for a songwriters festival. Then I looked at what Kathy was wearing. Wow. She had on a denim skirt that went to mid-thigh and a white top that hung off her shoulders. It showed off her waist, and you could see her stomach, too. She looked really great. Alex arrived on time with the van. He and Will were watching Shannon and Katrina, who was in a denim romper. River looked at Shannon from behind, rolled his eyes, shook his head, and said, "Wow!" I got into the van and saw Kathy in a cute sundress, making me pause. I leaned over and asked, "Are we ready for anything?" Will caught the drift and said, "Yeah, we should stop back at the house for some gear. These musicians can be a handful, and I don't want them thinking they can take over." Well, I don't have any bats or gear, Alex replied. But I have some tools and a knife with me. We should be okay, though I doubt Will or Lila will let things get out of hand. At that point, the girls started teasing us, with Kathy leading the charge. If you're trying to protect us, you're a bit late. Besides, wouldn't you be excited to know I met a country star? Oh, I'd be thrilled, especially with just a tool in my hands, I joked. Kathy squealed happily and hugged her husband. Shannon grinned at me and started to ask something, but I cut her off. Don't even think about it. If you end up with a country star, make sure he drops you off in Dallas because I'll be headed to Orla. So, you wouldn't fight for me? She asked playfully. Okay, that's a silly question, she said with a smile. I guess what you mean is, if I break your trust, I'm out of here? Yes, tonight or any day or night forever, you get it. But we haven't even said the vow about commitment yet. Can't I have a little fun before that? She pushed. Sure. Didn't you have a bit of fun last night? She replied while cuddling close to me. I heard you all had a celebration at Billy Goat, and there were some wild animals around after everyone left. Do you know anything about that? Brooke teased. That must have happened after we made sure the fire was out, I said with a grin, which made everyone laugh. The gate on the old road was open, but 2 men checked our names on a list before letting us go. I noticed we drove almost to the old bridge at Vincent's Crossing before turning to Will's house. I asked Alex about it. Yeah, it's right there. The last owner built a great house but didn't take care of the river. Will has people working to clean it up, and we should see the river about 100 yards down the road on our left. With a frown, Alex said, The people who own the 2 places across the bridge aren't looking after it. The metal frame is fine, but the wood is falling apart. It won't be long before they can't come in or out. Maybe that's good. Perhaps they will sell to Will, or someone who cares about the history they ignore. The occasional floods in South Texas had changed the river a bit, but the spot where we used to swim and have fun at night was still there, along with the sloped bank where we used blankets. That was on the opposite side of Will's property, which reached halfway into the river. A thought of Nita in the moonlight crossed my mind, quickly replaced by a memory of Shannon in the flickering firelight. She squeezed my leg as if she knew what I was thinking. The barn door was spacious, and a wide path ran the length of the building between the living area and the horse pens. This was perfect for the songwriters, who set up in the middle, so they would be surrounded by everyone. A young woman I didn't know, but Shannon did, was quietly tuning her instrument and warming up her voice. We placed our chairs behind the first 2 rows near a horse pen and set our coolers against the fence. Brooke was drinking water, River and Katrina were having water with some whiskey, and the rest of us were enjoying beer from the large cooler. Gary and Danny walked in and saw us, but the rest of the band wasn't in sight. The talented musicians came over to greet us, informing us that the hosts were busy preparing burgers, hot dogs, and sausages, along with bread, toppings, and sweets. The charcoal grills were ready to be lit, and soon they would join the growing crowd. Since the first singer, Dina, wasn't quite set, Gary suggested we take a quick look at their living space and the other rooms the Callahans had added. Brooke and Alex chose to sit, while the rest of us followed Gary into the building. The living area had a rustic charm typical of a barn-style home. It featured stained concrete floors, southwestern rugs in the main areas and bedrooms, and weathered wooden walls. A wooden dining table that seats 12 was nearby a shiny kitchen, and just across from a large couch that marked the living area. A walkway separated the dining table from the couch, leading to the front door. The bedrooms were quite nice, as were the attached bathrooms. The outside might be made of metal, but the inside was very welcoming. Instead of taking us back to the music, Gary opened the front door and encouraged us to follow him. There was more to explore. A group of small houses was set up further up the hill. It seemed their friends loved Cowtown, the ranch, and the modern recording and video studio so much that they bought these little houses and arranged to have them set up. Gary then took us around the barn to the food preparation area. When he noticed the hosts were away, he led us into the studio. None of us really understood the electronic equipment he excitedly talked about, but he was very proud, so we smiled and nodded along. From what I gathered from his descriptions, the gear was top-notch, producing clear music. He happily shared that they could upload a song and a video to online platforms all in the same day. We cheered for him, expressing our eagerness to see the studio at work, before heading back to the singers and our drinks, even though we didn't entirely grasp the details of what we had heard. Dina sang several songs I enjoyed, and a few I didn't. I like folk. Americana, classic country, western, bluegrass, and traditional country music, so I'm usually easy to please. I like some of the Red Dirt music and a few new Texas artists, but I can't get into pop posing as country, or the mix of hip-hop and country that's just not for me. Shannon was younger and from a different background, and she wasn't bothered by pop or hip-hop country at all. She reminded me that in high school and college, cheerleaders danced to some of the songs I wasn't fond of, cheering on the crowd. I told her the crowd wasn't cheering for the music. She liked my Sirius stations instead of the radio channels that played new country, and we often listened to them in her Jeep when we went out. To me, like a perfectly cooked steak, some things just don't sit right. We enjoyed 6 artists, all of whom were great in my opinion before the food was announced. The lines formed quickly, so we listened to 2 more artists before trying our luck for a shorter wait. I chose a burger, but the cook insisted I sample his homemade bratwurst and red cabbage too, so my plate was quite full. I grabbed some cold beers and shared them, giving Brooke a bottle of water while we listened to a talented trio. They featured a woman with a guitar and a smooth voice, a skilled musician who played many instruments and sang, and a guy from Australia with a mandolin and didgeridoo. They played funny songs, sad songs, Australian songs, and some haunting melodies. They also shared personal stories about each song and its writer. After their set, I approached them and shared that I would be streaming their music in the future. I was excited to hear how their songs would sound with all the different instruments. They were a bit older than me, but very likable and charming. I chatted with them while the crowd stayed to listen to the next act. The next performers were 2 young rappers. While I could appreciate the rhymes, adding guitar to it didn't make it country or folk music that I would listen to or pay for. I caught Will's eye, and he rolled his eyes and subtly shook his head. He looked over at Shannon, Kathy, Alex, and Brooke, who were enjoying the rappers and swaying along, and he motioned toward the back with his thumb. I nodded and got up. Shannon and Kathy didn't even notice. Alex was like the girls, focused on the performance. I grabbed 2 fresh beers, and we headed to the open area outside. A few older men were gathered around a cozy fire pit chatting. It was just cool enough for a fire, and flames always bring people together. "What's wrong? You young folks don't like new country?" one of them joked. "I prefer Ben Vaughn, Dave Macon, the Carter Family, bluegrass, Appalachian music, and artists like Bob Wills, Hank Sr. and Jr., Willie, Waylon, Merle, and Johnny. Great songwriters like Christofferson, Van Zandt, Ely, Hancock, and you two, Mr. Coe and Mr. Nunn." "Well, would you look at that? A true fan. How old are you, son?" "Almost 30, sir." "Cut the sir stuff, young man. We're just a group of guys who appreciate real country and Western music. I'm guessing your little brother here is one of us." Will smiled widely, shook hands, and shared some of his favorite songs like London Homesick Blues and the perfect country and Western song. Not everyone could be so bold and get away with it, but he did, impressing them with the concerts and dances he had attended. Baby brother was smooth. We chatted and exchanged funny stories about musicians we admired, and time flew by just like it does when you're having a good time. When I turned to listen again, the hip-hop artists had left, and a blonde teenager was playing her banjo and singing. She had a nice voice from what I could hear. Alex and Brooke were watching her, but I was searching for Shannon and didn't see her or Kathy. I nudged Will and suggested we find our friends before we got into trouble. As we walked away, I mentioned that they weren't in their seats. He talked about the tools he had in his car, and we looked around for them. They weren't in the alley or by the food stands, so where could they be? We checked the studio and the house and walked out front. Will grabbed my arm. "I see someone with blonde hair inside that little house over there. Let's go take a look." I sighed. "Look, we're engaged but not married. If she's going to be unfaithful, I want to know now." "Easy for you to say, but I've got 2 kids at home. Let's go." He hurried up the hill, trying to stay out of sight of the windows. I followed. If we caught them in a bad situation, it would turn into a very difficult night and an even worse month. I saw Kathy and a young man in a small hallway. He was leaning closer to her, but she was keeping some distance. He was talking about a new song they were working on and asking for her thoughts. After listening for a bit, Will laughed. This feels way too practiced. He must have rehearsed it. The question is whether it will make Kathy lose her guard, as he hopes. Shannon was in a more troubling spot. She and another young man were in a room that served multiple purposes, and he was standing too close for comfort. Unlike Will's joking response, I felt a rush of jealousy. He was too near her, and she wasn't stopping him. If they were to lie down on that bed, it would be a real mess. Forget about wanting to know, I was feeling extremely jealous. He put both hands on her shoulders and leaned in as if he intended to kiss her, or maybe push her onto the bed. I considered going back and coming through the front door when she kicked him away, pushed him onto a chair and said, "Thanks for the tour, but you really should have listened to the simple rule I gave you. Now you're in a lot of pain, and I didn't even get to see the loft. Maybe another time the owners can show me. Bye now." She marched into the hallway. Pretty boy one held up his hands and backed as far away as he could. Kathy laughed and told him, "I wasn't going to knee you if you broke the golden rule. I was going to give you a good talking to, pretty boy. We ought to tell our husbands, but that would take too long. Bye be now." They came out the door and downstairs, giggling and praising one another, but 10 feet down their path stood 2 men with their arms folded across their broad chests and scowls on their faces. Kathy immediately threw up both hands and proclaimed, "He never touched me." "Okay," Will replied incredulously, "but explain why you were in a house with a strange man after you've been drinking. Haven't we had a conversation about stuff like that already?" Kathy's blue eyes widened, but Shannon interjected. "They invited us to see their friend's tiny home, and their friends gave them a key. You all were occupied over at the fire pit, and we wanted to see one. We made it very clear we were only interested in seeing the house before we agreed to go. And Keith did try to get too close, but I stopped him and we left. So, they just came up to your seats and invited you to go see their place? Sounds unlikely." Even in the dark, I could see her blush. "No, after their set, we went over to talk with them like a dozen others, and we all ended up outside by the food. They ate a brat and answered questions from their fans, then thanked everyone for their support. Most moved away, but they told us to stay. Keith got the keys from a guy and invited us to see their tiny house. We had the conversation about being married and engaged, and they agreed. We decided to go with them, but keep our distance." Kathy continued the description. "I walked beside Shannon as we followed them to the house. Aaron and I looked around inside first, and then we came out so Keith could show Shannon around. Looked to me like he was showing her something he shouldn't have," I interjected, teasing them now that the event was behind us without harm. Shannon was thinking about how to answer that when Will coolly said, "So you were following these guys around like fans wanting a picture, or maybe more like one of their admirers. Did you throw him your number on a piece of paper?" Kathy laughed and said, "I didn't, but you might want to check with Shannon." Before she could react, I playfully grabbed her wrist. "Nope, but I can tell you she's blushing. Being that close to the excitement must have gotten her all flustered." She grabbed my wrist with both hands and attempted a quick maneuver to spin away, trying to playfully assert her independence. She's strong in a cheerleader and gymnast way, but I'm strong like someone who works on an oil rig, so my attempt to lift her didn't go as planned. She made a funny face and then started to laugh. Since she wanted to have fun, I lightly grabbed her by the waist, bent my knees, and tossed her into the air like a rocket ship. She cheered and did a little twist in the air for balance, landing safely in my arms. She couldn't stop giggling, just like a little kid who's being silly. Our friends, Will, Kathy, Lila, Lena, and Woody, were all watching with smiles. "We came out to check on you girls and arrived just in time for the fun. Thanks for that, especially from Woody and me. I can't really speak for my wife," I said. "As we used to say in college," Lila grinned, and then looked at Lena and Shannon. Shannon giggled again, and they all chanted together, "Why get rid of the prettier half?" Lila joined in the laughter. "At some point, Will might want to share funny stories from living with these two," Woody joked, pointing at Lena and Lila with a smile. "Let me go, you monster," Shannon laughed. "I've already put on enough of a show." But I noticed she wasn't even trying to get away. I gently set her down, and she straightened her skirt. "I'm ready for a drink," she announced. She linked arms with Kathy, and then grabbed Lena's arm, who in turn caught Lila's, and off they marched together, showing their girl power. I looked at the other guys, whose eyes were glued to the 4 women, and Woody said, I would pay to see this. Definitely. The others agreed, and we followed behind, but without linking arms. The 4 musketeers were getting so much attention near the alley entrance that they turned into the 6, then 8 musketeers, attracting even more guys to join them. In the alley, 4 country rockers had formed a makeshift band and started playing songs. They promised to sing hits from famous bands and urged everyone to get up and dance. There were a few songwriters who hadn't yet performed, but nobody minded. We danced along happily for about an hour before taking a break. People grabbed fresh drinks and settled into chairs, asking someone to sing. Those who hadn't yet performed happily took the stage, entertaining their friends. When the last performer finished, Gary and Danny arrived with instruments and microphones, called a few more people up to play, and picked up where the last band left off. They even mixed in some slow songs, and we danced with whoever was nearest. 10 songs later, Lena found herself in my arms. I had lost track of Shannon among the crowd of swaying, mostly tipsy people. Lena pressed against me, making it clear she wanted to see how quickly I could respond to her closeness, and it didn't take long at all. She pointed out a man in a black cowboy hat. "See that guy? He's with someone dancing over there. He's got charm, and he thinks very highly of himself." Lena smirked and said, "We can go over and switch partners, or you can let me enjoy being close to you. What do you want to do?" I playfully gave her a gentle squeeze and brought her closer. "Can I enjoy being close to you too?" She didn't respond directly, but let out a soft sound of pleasure. "Just don't push me too far, and don't let me take you away to my place." "What if I take you there?" I teased, and pulled her even closer. She leaned in, but we found ourselves moving through the crowd, creating some space between us. Before we knew it, we stood near the man with the hat and the woman with him, who seemed to be playfully scolding him. Lena said to her, "He's more than I can handle. I'll take this one, and you take him for a spin. Just be careful, he's trouble." The woman looked at me and asked with a playful smile, "Do you think you can keep up with me?" I joked back, "Maybe, but I'd enjoy finding out." As the night went on, I felt a mix of excitement and happiness. Whatever had brought Shannon to life at the barn was something special. She made everyone laugh, and when we finally squeezed into the van with Brooke driving, she started sharing her wild ideas again. She suggested dancing around a fire, saying people had done that since the beginning of time. Alex agreed it could be fun, which earned him a light jab in the chest from our driver, the only sober one in the group, Kathy. Shannon then asked if the dancing happened while everyone was present or later, when things got wild. Kathy's question didn't faze her. She continued talking about how society is strict about nudity, mentioning that in many parts of the world people are comfortable with it. I chimed in, reminding her that in some places even showing an ankle could cause trouble, but she was on a roll. She remarked on how cheerleaders and gymnasts drew attention for their performances, while even a hint of nudity in movies could lead to strict ratings. "How is it fair," she asked, "that it's okay to show violence in movies, but not a little human skin? My brothers and their wives had never seen her drunk before, and I hadn't either. We thought she was amusing and laughed at her behavior, but her fiancé seemed a bit worried. There were clearly things going on that I didn't fully understand." Brooke dropped us off at the hotel and said to be at her house at 8 for breakfast and a chat. There were decisions to make. We walked into the hotel holding each other close, and I learned that a Shannon who had been drinking acted very differently. She didn't hurt me, but I would have been okay with that. Katrina and River chose to have breakfast and talk with Ken and his wife, who had just come back from visiting her mom in Oklahoma. I took my calmer bride Toby to Brooke's breakfast. They teased her about her dancing and being like a cheerleader, but she just sipped her coffee and smiled, waiting for the main topic to come up. Brooke jumped straight in. "First of all, there's no discussion. You two are not going to wait 10 more years or even 10 more months before you come back here. You have nieces and nephews who need to see you, parents to check in on, and siblings who will miss you. Are we all in agreement on that?" When no one objected, she continued, "You guys need to decide what to do about Mom and Dad's old house. It has pests and who knows what else. And aside from some photos and keepsakes, it really needs to go. Will and Alex have a storage place where we can keep things until you can sort through them. But honestly, it's both ugly and a health risk." I raised my hand to speak, and she playfully said, "Yes, Theodore. I agree, and I think the place would be better off gone. I don't have any good memories there that I want to keep." but I won't be around to deal with it, so it'll be another task for you. That's okay, Will said. Kathy and I want it taken care of for the reasons she mentioned. What are you planning to do with the property then? I asked. Alex and Will exchanged looks with their wives and then shrugged. We haven't thought that far ahead. Why? If you don't need it, I might want to buy it. Maybe I could set up a place for an RV to stay when we come visit. Shannon didn't seem against it, but she looked curious. Towing an RV all the way here didn't seem like a great idea. The hotel would be more comfortable. Okay, Brooke said. We'll leave that to you guys. Item 3 is Shannon's. I called my brother after you two agreed to join the wedding, she said, looking at Alex and Will. We discussed the first plans and came up with something new. His little one and your little ones will throw flower petals, and your older kids will carry the rings if that works for you. We can cover the tuxedos and dresses. No, you won't. We will find matching tuxedos and dresses, and we'll be there for the rehearsal, Kathy insisted. You're taking care of our rooms and food. We'll handle the rest, and that's final. All right, then. Item 4, Brooke said with a playful grin. Where are you going for your honeymoon? Shannon looked at her fiancé and asked, Yes, honey, where are we going for our honeymoon? I met her gaze and inquired, Right here and now? Are you really sure? Yes, I am, and so is everyone else, including the Paytons and my family. Okay, but can I share my idea and get your thoughts? It's not too late to change plans. Of course, go ahead. From the stories you and your family have shared, you've traveled a lot. To the Caribbean islands, Hawaii, Europe, and even Asia. You've skied in Park City and Aspen and shopped in New York City. You've also enjoyed spring break in Florida and had wine tours in California. Meanwhile, I've only been to 2 states and 1 foreign country, if you count Nuevo Laredo. I contacted a travel agent, but everywhere she suggested, Brad said you've already been. But according to him, you didn't get to see much because Dad was always rushing. You flew in, enjoyed a quick vacation, skied or whatever, and then flew back, right? She nodded, looking even more interested. Remember a few weeks ago when I got up early to check auction offers? As usual, there were last-minute items, mostly from bankruptcies. I noticed one that caught my eye because the starting bid was very low. I'm not an expert, but I know enough to realize $50,000 is a steal. It was the first item for bidding, and most people weren't logged on yet. Someone placed the minimum bid while I was browsing the gallery, and without thinking further, I raised his bid by $10,000. I was going to stop at $100,000 because I was confident I could manage that amount, no matter the state of the item. But no one else bid, so suddenly I was the proud owner of a 2018 Phaeton diesel motorhome. Thinking ahead, I had the dealership pick it up and inspect everything carefully. The engine, powertrain, the 4 slide-outs, the roof, TV antenna, and all the interior items, including appliances and the heating and cooling system. The service technician called me back 2 days later. He told me it was in perfect condition, but they cleaned it, changed the oil and fluids, put on new tires, and made sure everything was tuned up so it would be ready for our travels. He then asked me to talk to the sales department. They offered me $250,000 in cash, but I said no because I knew the value by then. So, dear, we have a very nice 40-foot motorhome that we could take on our honeymoon. Just wait until you see my travel plans. Have you ever visited the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas and Oklahoma? Driven through the plains and watched the Rocky Mountains come into view? I know you've been to Aspen, but have you seen a baseball game at Coors Field or toured the Coors Brewery? Gambled in Central City? Watched elk in Estes Park? Taken a drive on Trail Ridge Road and walked to the top? Seen Yellowstone, the Grand Tetons, or even the Grand Canyon from the sky? My soon-to-be wife smiled at me. That's so you. You love Ruidoso, the shops in Santa Fe, and Carlsbad Caverns. I can picture you traveling across the country in a big RV. And we'll be towing your Wrangler behind us. The motorhome has a powerful diesel engine, so we can pull anything. We can park it in a nice RV park and take your Jeep anywhere, even up the steepest roads. Or park it somewhere and come down here to visit your nieces and nephews, Brooke asked with a grin. Absolutely, I replied. And once we're back from our honeymoon, we can take weekend trips to Big Bend, Taos, Angel Fire, or Dallas to see your family, or anywhere we want. As she often does when she's happy with me, she came over and sat on my lap. See why I love this guy? He's just a big kid at heart, and you know what they say. The only difference between a man and a boy is the price of his toys. After that sales job, I can't wait to travel the country with you. But how long did you say our honeymoon is? That's quite a trip, and winter is coming soon. Our bosses said we need to be back for Thanksgiving, so we have some time, but yes, we need to pay attention to the weather. But honey, would being stuck in the snow for a few days be so bad? I teased her, and she giggled. I might not survive a week stuck indoors with her, but I'd be happy. We all had lunch at Ramon's to enjoy one last taste of Tex-Mex, said our goodbyes, and headed northwest. My mom was less anxious, and my dad was almost friendly when we saw him. My brothers, sisters-in-law, nephews, and nieces were sad to see us go and urged us to visit again soon. I felt a little sad, but everyone else said to wake them when we reached Uvalde. I didn't wake them up, but I did when we arrived at Neil's Cabins in Concan, where we had a room booked for the night. It was too late and chilly to go tubing, that's why they named it the Frio River. So we enjoyed sandwiches from the cooler and called it a day. The next day, we visited beautiful places like Garner State Park, Leakey, Barksdale, and Rock Springs. Then we sped along to Junction and beyond. The speed limit on I-10 is 80, but you would get left behind going that slow, so I followed a driver with lots of radio antennas who was moving fast. We zipped through Sonora, Ozona, and Fort Stockton before saying goodbye and heading toward Pecos and home. They wanted to see pictures of our honeymoon trip, so River showed them how to find the photo gallery. Shannon gave me her excited look and said, "Not bad. Not bad at all." I worked hard for 2 weeks, but Shannon caught a flight from Midland to Dallas the day after we reached Orla. It turns out last-minute wedding plans take 3 weeks. Despite her mother's worries about being proper in public, my greeting from my FaceTime buddy was very lively when I got to Love. It was even more cheerful when we left Mom behind and went to my room to drop off my bags. That took a whole hour, making us almost late to a dinner hosted by friends of her parents. The conversation there was rather stiff and dull, but the food was fantastic. We made our excuses after a while and returned to my room. Shannon paused at midnight to text her mom about where she was, and that was the last we heard from her for a time. In the morning, we used our break to check on our motorhome and take it for a test drive. From the driver's seat, it handled well for a big vehicle, had plenty of power, and everything was in order. From Shannon's perspective, this is a dream vehicle, so much better than an airplane for seeing the view. The furniture is cozy, the bedding is great, and I love the mattress on the big bed. So comfortable. I can't wait to use it. I didn't have time for it, and I didn't want Shannon to miss out either. So I hired an interior designer, the dealership owner's daughter, to improve and stock the RV, and she seemed to meet Shannon's high standards, which deserved a nice tip. Shannon did have a few suggestions for her, but she seemed very happy. We would pick it up the morning after the wedding and head to Hot Springs, Arkansas, a place neither of us had visited before. I might not be as great as Daddy, but I can introduce her to new experiences and emotions. Hopefully, that will be enough. Compared to all the Bridezilla stories I'd heard, Shannon was surprisingly calm. A busy florist who was missing a certain flower for the party? "No problem. What do you have that matches our colors?" asked a caterer who hesitated to offer meals suitable for kids. "That's fine. I can find someone else. Just give back the deposit on your way out." I wasn't used to this, but I decided to look for another option. "You have 1 hour to confirm." When I asked her about it, she replied, "Do you know how many sorority dances and fancy parties I have organized? There's always another way. Besides, 100 years from now, no one will remember." Shannon Alana Barnes is not just stunning. She has a lot more going on than meets the eye. This is going to be an exciting adventure, and we kick things off in 2 days. My family, consisting of 6 adults and 4 kids, arrived in the afternoon from different places and gathered at the hotel. That evening, her sorority sisters and cheer squad members came with their partners, and her family arrived too. We took over the bar. When one of her bridesmaids asked if she had booked the band she wanted, she smiled and said she hadn't, but she found an even better one that everyone would love. She didn't reveal the band, saying it would be a fun surprise. Her lovely sisters were there with their boyfriends, and since they all had shared experiences with the sorority sisters and cheerleaders, everyone was having a great time. As they were leaving, Shannon's mom asked when she would be home. When Shannon said later tonight, her mother looked surprised. But they had agreed on a short break to make our special time together even better. Shannon's wedding party included her sisters as maids of honor, her college roommate and best friend Allison, and her close cheerleading friends Salah, Kim, and Michelle. They represented 10 months of the Playgirls of Texas Tech calendars, which were popular both in Lubbock and online. Seeing them in person made it clear why they were so well loved. My best man was River, and my groomsmen were Will, Alex, Brad, Abe, and Beto, a friend chosen by the group who had supported me through the years in the oil field. I wanted everyone to come, but they were still hesitant, despite loving Shannon just as much as I did. The rehearsal went smoothly, although Shannon changed who would walk with whom based on size and other factors. The dinner, hosted by River and Katrina, was a unique mix of roast and love story, with all the wedding party members, both sets of parents, and Shannon's grandparents sharing toasts and heartwarming stories. This time there were no awkward stories from the hen party or bachelor party because we didn't have either one. To top it off, we all went back to our rooms at midnight. I missed her sweet smell and the soft feel of her skin in my bed more than I expected. 2 nights apart felt longer than the 2 weeks she spent in Dallas while I was in New Mexico. Maybe it was just the excitement building up. On Saturday morning, our wedding day, she called me early just to hear my voice. After I made sure she was not having cold feet and that she missed my touch, we talked about the plan for the day. The guys were playing golf, while the women were off to a spa and for their makeup. Brad suggested the golf idea, and it turned out to be a lot of fun. Apart from Brad, his dad, granddad, and River, we weren't very good at golf at all. I had played more mini-golf than real golf, as the closest course was 50 miles away, and I doubted Beto even knew what a golf club was. But River seemed to play quite well. It turns out many business deals happen on golf courses around Midland. I tend to be clueless when it comes to tricky situations, but it didn't seem odd when Will, Lily, Woody, and his wife Shannon, Gary, Danny, Lena, and the sound technician for the BGH Pundits joined us. They said they were in town for a gig, and Shannon had recommended this course during a songwriter event. They were much better than my brothers and me, which wasn't hard to do, and they brought a lot of laughter to the game. My in-laws joked with me, but they didn't mean any harm. They often asked how the athletic car boys could struggle so much on the golf course, but we didn't mind. We knew we were bad and admitted it. Back home, we had plenty to do besides spend 6 hours playing a game. Lila, Shannon, and Lena had other plans and left after 9 holes. When the men finished, there was a tray of sandwiches waiting for us at the country club. It was during lunch that I started to learn about the business world River and the Barnes family had mastered. My first lesson came from Will Callahan himself. "I heard you guys are thinking about setting up an RV spot on your parents' land, is that true?" That seemed like a simple question. "Yes, I just got a motorhome, and we want to come by occasionally to stay close as a family." "So you and Cowtown are not enemies anymore?" Woody joked. I always thought of the song "You're Always 17 in Your Hometown" as a warning because of how I left when I moved northwest. But it looks like I wasn't as looked down upon as I thought. I reconnected with my brothers and a few old friends, and I got to know your band better. That's one big reason, along with the delicious Tex-Mex food, that my lovely bride and I like to visit from time to time. Or at least, that's what she says. We also hear you have some money available from a deal with the state of New Mexico. Is that true? I looked at River's serious face and realized there was more happening than I realized. Honestly, I'm not sure. River handles that part of the business. He sends me money once in a while, and I pass it to my investment advisor to figure out what to do with it. Why do you ask? I know of a nice piece of land for sale across the river from me. The owner needs some quick cash after taking on too much with his fast food restaurants. I looked at River, then back at Will. What size is the land? Where is it, and how much do they want? It's a section, and like I said, it's right across the river from me. I think you used to swim there when you were younger. So it was near the Callahan's place, what we called Vincent's Crossing. Okay, I know where it is now, but what's the price? The land is going for around $3,000 per acre for that size, Will said. I'm not a math expert, but that adds up to nearly $2 million. Is that price for someone who can wait, or for someone who really needs the money? That's what a similar piece of land sold for after being listed for a year, Will replied with a smile. Even if River and my advisor agreed to it, I wouldn't pay that much without knowing the condition of the bridge, I said. Everyone at the table seemed amused, and then Alex chimed in. I have a bridge crew. We build and repair many bridges. I recently gave a quote to the landowner and his neighbor. Depending on who can use that land and the river, I might help lower that price a bit. Now, everyone was smiling. Well, this is turning out better than I expected. Walking out from behind the divider with River, Will, Alex, Brad, Abe, and Beto was a thrill like nothing I had ever felt. I looked out at the church. As expected, the bride's side was nearly full. I turned to the groom's side, expecting only a few people to be there, mostly from the bride's guests. To my surprise, the groomsmen and 4 of Shannon's cousins had set up Katrina, Kathy, and Brooke on the family row. Not surprisingly, after the morning, they were surrounded by the Billy Goat Hill pundits. What surprised me the most was the large group of my old classmates and teammates gathered behind them, along with about 40 of my friends from Orla, all dressed in their best. I looked at River, who had a big smile, and I felt a few tears come to my eyes. Katrina's eyes were already wet with emotion, and Kathy and Brooke were getting misty as they watched the beautiful flower girls and the 2 ring bearers. The children moved gracefully down the aisle, greeted by the groomsmen who stepped forward to stand with them. When the lovely maids of honor found their places, the music paused. Then the bridal march started. Daddy Barnes was as proud as can be as he took his youngest daughter's arm and made sure they walked together for that first step. The bride looked more beautiful than anyone could imagine, floating down the aisle with her father by her side. She and the hundreds of guests told me I had the look of love while I watched her, but all I could feel was amazement. Dad managed to say her mother and I, when someone asked him a question, but he stumbled walking the few steps to the front pew, most likely because tears were rolling down his cheeks. Mom, just as emotional, comforted him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. The bridal bouquet was no longer in sight, and I found myself holding her gentle hands, looking into her beautiful green eyes, feeling thankful for this precious gift from above. I knew I didn't deserve such a blessing. I'm not the best with words, but when asked to promise to love and cherish this amazing woman forever, my voice was strong and clear. Her lovely voice matched mine, and our first kiss as a married couple felt magical. We took a countless number of pictures with many friends and family. My family photos took just as long as hers because she wanted us to capture moments with our band, our friends from back home, and our co-workers from the oil industry. When her family asked to include me in their pictures with the bride, it made me feel welcomed. These were well-off and cultured people, yet they embraced me, my family, and my friends, even insisting on a big group shot that took up all the stairs outside. As we headed to the reception hall to start our next tasks, her friends and family were sitting with mine, sharing stories on the buses. You can imagine what happens at a wedding reception, so I won't go into details, except to say the food was excellent and the speeches were thoughtful and filled with love. Brad got emotional, shedding tears of joy as he talked about how I had stepped in to help his sister and how we ended up so well together. Katrina cried when she recounted my troubled, angry self from years ago looking for a job and the start of Shannon's first internship. Our bittersweet goodbye and her triumphant return 5 years later were shared by my oldest friend, Juan Jose Aguilar, in a heartfelt way. I faced some teasing for being sentimental from the other guys at the camp, but it was mostly in Spanish, so not everyone caught on. I hope not too many did. Woody introduced the band, and Will shared how the bride convinced him in just one dance that this was truly the right band for their wedding. As the laughter, applause, and cheers about her charm faded, the couple came together, and the pundits played a song that Lila wrote about how the couple first met, felt an instant connection, and then found their way back to each other in lasting love. We finished that song with a warm hug and a kiss, then danced to Silver Wings, our first song together. After that, the traditional dances began. Katrina's love for her adopted son was clear in the Motherson dance, just as Daddy's love for his youngest son shone through in their dance. I danced with Shannon's mom, both grandmothers, and my sisters-in-law. She danced with many men, including her grandfathers and the groomsmen. Then she gathered all the ladies for a lively series of rock songs that surprised some of the more reserved guests. Lila, Shannon, and Lena joined her, and the band played on, enjoying themselves as much as the dancers. Part of me wanted to join in, but it seemed like Shannon was trying to bring together her wedding party, family, old friends, and cheerleading buddies. Besides, it was fun just to watch. Being true to herself, Shannon skipped the traditional white wedding gown for a knee-length dress in baby blue and white, which suited her style and dance moves perfectly. I wore a tuxedo with a baby blue vest, but my pants, jacket, and tie were black. We looked great together, even if I was dressed more traditionally. I knew that was how it would be for me in the future, so why not embrace it? After the reception, we took a bus back to the hotel and walked to the elevators with some guests. They joked about joining us, but Shannon said 2 quiet nights were enough, and she was ready to enjoy their new married life. When we finally got to bed, though, she wanted to cuddle, talk about the evening, and share some sweet moments together. You can never quite predict what she'll want. One of the interesting upgrades she made to the motor coach was a clever padded chair that could be rolled into the space next to the driver and secured in place. Because of the size and type of vehicle, there was no seatbelt requirement, but the chair did have one just in case. It allowed her to sit beside me, or when she became more confident driving, I could sit next to her. It wasn't as comfortable as a bench seat, but it was better than 2 captain's chairs sitting far apart. The 300-mile drive to Hot Springs took us longer than we thought it would, which often seemed to happen on our journey. Some travelers get very excited about checking out new places in their RV, so we learned to look for parking spots like Walmart, truck stops, and rest areas where we could take a break. Our powerful diesel engine could carry a lot of fuel, but it also used a lot, which added to our travel time. The weather was nice at the lower elevations, allowing us to continue on our trip. However, the higher areas were often closed, meaning we couldn't use the Jeep as we had planned, but we did enjoy more time together. 3 weeks after we set off, we were exploring Arizona, and a week later we turned north off I-10 heading to Orla. The honeymoon is part of a different story, but here are a few quick thoughts. 1. Shannon really likes traveling in the RV much more than flying first class, unless we just want to get somewhere quickly. It's much easier to stop when you need to in a motorhome. 2. My wife is very moved by nature. She's excited by views from mountaintops, waking up in a beautiful forest after it has snowed, exploring the wilderness, and enjoying campfires. 3. Even though she doesn't have a lot of experience, what may become endless creativity in our activities can sometimes be a little tough. Her small size and eagerness to try new things can be a challenge. 4. Shannon is truly remarkable, and I believe that will always be the case, even as we prepare for our future together. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to Infidelity Plus to stay updated with more captivating tales of infidelity and payback. Turn on notifications so you're the first to see our latest content.